You are listening to the Secret Teachings Radio. I'm your host, Ryan Gable. Thank you so much for tuning in to this live Friday night broadcast. I'm broadcasting Saturday from Japan. Most of you are listening in the United States, but we do have listeners around the world. Whenever and wherever you are tuned into the show, thank you so much for joining us. tstradio.info is the website. Most of you know that. It's at the bottom of the screen. If you're listening via audio only, which is, I think, the mass majority of our audience, the audio only version of the show supports us when you listen to it, when you stream it, when you download it. Thank you so much for doing that and keeping us able to do not only the show, but these live Friday night broadcasts on YouTube, X, and Facebook. If you have any questions, comments, etc., please email me at rdgable@yahoo.com. And you'll see whether you're in the audio or the video show. Either way, there will be links below to everything about the Secret Teachings radio show. Tonight's promo and tonight's show name is called Gate of the Gods. And before we begin, I wanted to share with you my intent and my goal with tonight's show. And then I will acknowledge all of you who have tuned in the chat room as well. And then we'll get started with the main presentation. So, as you know, the last couple of weeks, especially, at least since June 13th, we've been heavily focused on, well, I've been focused on it, although it might not seem like I've been focused on it. I've been focused on trying to understand and trying to help others to understand religion, helping people to understand at least the three Abrahamic religions and to find the truth buried in all of the various forms of propaganda and misinformation that we hear about those Abrahamic religions, particularly against Islam in relation to Christianity and Judaism. And when I try to bring understanding to those things, it's not because I'm a Muslim, it's not because I want you to convert to Islam, it's because I'm trying to bring balance to a very disproportionate and very imbalanced subject. And that's kind of my goal with any sort of religious discussion. You know, the word religion comes from religare, means to bind. And a lot of people think that that's a bad thing. Perception's a really important part of every show, but especially tonight's show. But to bind does not necessarily mean that we are being bound to something bad or that we're being bound in a negative way. Because if you're bound to God, well, that's a positive thing. And if you're struggling with that connection to God, that's what Israel is. Israel is the person who struggles with God. It's every one of God's chosen people. So when people translate Islam and say that means submission and they want you to submit to the Islamic extremist leaders, well, you can interpret it that way, but the original word actually means submit to God or submit to Allah in Arabic. And it's similar, not the same, but similar in Judaism. You're submitting to a tribal deity, but a God nonetheless that you are submitting yourself to. And when you follow that tribal deity, or when you follow Allah, or when you follow Jesus, you're following the way and the path of Krishna, where most of these religions, including Judaism, ultimately stems to some degree. It stems from India and ancient Babylonia, including the main subject of tonight's show, which is Shintoism. And I wanted to share this all with you because since we've been discussing these other religious aspects, I want to be able to show you one, kind of what I feel personally. You might think you know what I feel from dozens of hours of radio, but I wanted to share with you what I feel about religion in a personal way, although it's not really religion, and we'll get into why that is. And I wanted to share with you that no matter where you go in the world, humans see the world in a very, very similar way. And humans see the world in a manner that is it's different than animals. It's different than plants. It's different than all the other realms, the minerals, the elements. We see the world differently. But in regard to each other, we see it, yes, certainly from different perspectives, but we're all witnessing the same reality to some extent in terms of what we actually see. And
that's one thing I've tried to point out on this show for years, is that it doesn't matter where you are in the world. Even if you're in a place that gets very little sun, you still see the sun. Doesn't matter where you are in the world, you still see the moon. And so in every culture, the moon, the sun, these have been godlike or goddess-like expressions of the divine, in the same way that no matter where you go in the world, if there are mountains, then you're going to see that the people there locally that live there, or people that have lived there in the past, are going to deify those mountains, because that's where God is. That's why we have the story of Mount Sinai. That's why we have the various Indian stories of the sacred mountains, or the sacred mountain of Fuji-san, or Mount Fuji in Japan, and so on and so forth around the world. That's where God comes down to earth. So if we understand that all of these things are really the same human understandings, the same human perceptions, it's the same human experience, then that can allow us to see each other maybe in a little bit more of an acceptable human way, rather than everybody's an outsider who doesn't agree with our particularly prescribed religion, or whatever you want to call it. So that's my goal. That's my intention with tonight's show. Also, on this particular episode and on an older episode, here at the beginning of the show, we've had not a technical issue, but my mixing board did not connect directly to the computer right away. So that's why you might have heard some tinny audio. Although if you're in the audio only version of the show, which is going straight from my board, you won't hear that. So you won't know what I'm talking about. But let's go ahead and welcome everybody in the chat. Bad Whiskey, Michael, Nate. Actually, all three of those guys were here way earlier. They were here, I think, last night. They had commented in the chat room. Deborah is here. I'm just one lone nut. I'll try to pronounce this name. Katarzina, Noka, Joe Ryder, Edward Preston, Leonard, Mistos Dokos. It's a great name, Mr. Dokos, Mysteries. The Portal, Mistos Dokos asks, where's the portal taking us tonight? Well, I think you probably have an idea now based on what I've said, and we'll get into the presentation here in just a moment. Patriot Girl, Kay Owens. I'll go through this a little faster. PT, Diane Perry, Patrick T, B. Kuna. I'm trying to get to everybody. Darren Bird. I've come to enjoy the live feeds as well. Yes, Darren. I just don't trust YouTube to keep them up. So I don't want to make this the home of the show. Of course, it's still Spreaker, Apple, etc. But I'm glad that you enjoy the show, Darren. Evan Kelly. Howdy, Evan. Brad Pitbull. And these chats keep coming in faster than I can see. Bev S. King Sweet. Reno Mac. And King Sweet threw a little Torii gate up there. Yes, that is a Torii gate, or Torii. I'm just one nut. Did I already say your name? Jackie is in the chat room as well. And let's see who else we have in here. Anybody else? Kathy just joined us as well. And I think that there are a handful of other people too, but if you haven't commented, comment, and I'll throw your name on the screen at some point here. Thank you for joining us. Like I said, I'm Ryan Gable. This is The Secret Teachings, tstradio.info, rdgable@yahoo.com. Thank you for tuning in to the broadcast. Thank you, because if it's not for you, we don't do this show. There's no reason to do this show. Okay, so I will remove from the screen the promo picture, and I'm going to put up on the screen something, a number of pictures that I myself took that I wanted to show you, wanted to share with you from a recent trip I took with my wife for her birthday. And I had no intention of sharing these. They were just pictures I took for myself. But then I thought, no, this actually could be useful to tonight's show. So let me show you some of these pictures. Obviously, if you're only listening in audio, you can't see them. I know that. But you can watch the video for free later if you download the audio show and stream it and you find out, oh, there's video. Well, go and listen to the show and then go watch the video, or whatever you choose to do. Here on the screen, you will see some pictures that I took recently in Hakone, Japan. And these pictures are really interesting. I had no idea where we were even going necessarily for, I mean, she told me we were going to Hakone. We were going to an onsen, a hot spring. I had no idea that this Torii Gate, one of the most iconic places in the world, especially in Japan, that this Torii Gate was located there in Hakone. I had no idea that's where we were actually going. It's one place I didn't get to go when I was on my trip before. And I'll also state that tonight's show is not me talking about my life. It's just me showing you some things that I took pictures of because they're relevant to tonight's show. And I want to share some of this stuff with you. Here's another version of that Torii Gate. If you're only listening by audio, this Torii Gate is a very famous one. It's not just a standard Torii Gate. It has additional supports on the columns. So it kind of looks like it has, well, it's got 6 different platforms. And it's in the water, and it's in Hakone. So if you look up Hakone Shrine, you'll see this very, very famous, like world famous Torii Gate. And that's Torii, Torii. Torii is bird, so you have to be very careful. Torii. It's an extra E. Torii. And that extra I, where we pronounce it E, Torii, is the gate that you see on the screen, and that's the gate that you've probably seen in video games and movies and TV shows. You probably know what these gates are. Here's a picture of the gate from a distance. We took, I think it was looked like a cruise ship, but it was more of a ferry that took us across this lake, which is way high up in the mountains. Here's another image of the Torii Gate from the boat. And the reason I'm showing you this is because there's Mount Fuji in the background. That's the closest I've ever gotten to Mount Fuji. In fact, I've lived here for 5 months. Well, including my trip before, I've lived here for closing in on a year now. So I was here 3 months before. And I did not get to see Mount Fuji. So this was the first time I really got to see Fuji-san. You can see Fuji off in the distance there. It is massive. And that is despite the fact that we're already in the Hakone Mountains, way up in the mountains. And there's Fuji in the background dominating it all. And that Torii Gate I showed you is a gate. It's a gateway. And it takes you into the shrine, the inner sanctum. Well, there's a main shrine, and there's usually an inner sanctum that you can't visit. Sometimes there's, depending on how large the shrine is, there are various different sections to it, and each one of them have their own meanings. This particular shrine, Hakone Shrine, this is the shrine that's considered the main shrine. It's on the ground, if you will, compared to where the next shrine is I'm going to show you. And the next shrine is on top of a mountain. It's on top of the mountain, on top of this mountain. And this is the very top of the mountain where you can see a large rock, a very small shrine, and then Hakone Shrine in the background. And on top of this mountain, there is another Torii Gate that leads you into the main shrine. I thought this picture was really great because it's got all that kind of mist clouds. We're really high up. You can see the clouds coming by. The clouds kind of made it really hazy. And that is essentially my picture presentation. I just wanted to show you this because I wanted to find out first how high was this mountain? Because we had to take, first of all, we took a train, and we took another train. Then we took a train up a mountain. Then we took a cable car up another mountain. Then we took a cable car up a cable line up another mountain to get to the top of the shrine. So I looked it up to find out how tall this place was, how big it was, how high up it was. Hakone Shrine, which is on the shores of Lake Ashi, is about 2,400 feet. The shrine's inner sanctum is Hakone Motomiya, which is on top of Mount Komagatake, which is about double the height. So it's pretty high up. And when you get to the very top, as you're going up to the very top, you'll hear an announcement in a number of different languages, and they'll tell you something really important or really special about this mountain. And it grabbed my attention immediately when I heard the announcement. And then we got to the top of the mountain, and I read the plaque. And I had my wife read it. I could read like maybe 10% of it, but she read it, and I could read the part that was important. And that was that this mountain, the very top of this mountain, Hakone Motomiya, is the place where God is said to have descended to earth. In fact, at this particular location with the very small shrine, with the guardian dogs, the large rock, and the inner shrine in the background. And behind that is Mount Fuji. Now, this place is really old. That's why it's very worn down. But another reason that it's worn down is because, as you see in our promo picture tonight, the Torii Gate there is kind of, and the shrine itself, if you go to the shrine, it's kind of torched. And that's because in the past, Mount Fuji had erupted and it had burned a lot of this shrine, and they've had to repaint things, they've had to rebuild things. In fact, there's an area here that just has large chunks of mountain all over it that looks like some kind of explosion, which there was because the volcano erupted. And so this shrine has almost been taken out by Mount Fuji on, I guess, at least one, maybe more than one occasion. But this spot here is the place where God supposedly came down to earth. Now, the reason, again, that I'm sharing this with you is because that's a universal story. Okay, this is in Japan. And regardless of looking at the history of especially the various parts of Asia, and depending on what time period you look at, this is getting way too off topic and making it a little bit too complex, but a lot of land here and everywhere else in the world was, of course, above water when sea levels were much lower. And so at one point or another, Japan was very much landlocked, and the Sea of Japan was more like a giant lake, more like a Great Lake. And we're talking thousands and thousands and thousands of years. But there have been things like, for example, some of the oldest, in fact, the oldest pottery in the world is found in Japan. I believe the oldest leather is also found in Japan. And I believe they date back 15, 16,000 BC or something around that date. Again, irrelevant to tonight's show, but they've also found, archaeologists have, Jomon pottery in Brazil, which is to this day one of the places that have the most Japanese people living in it outside of Japan and the United States. This is kind of interesting and important because we don't normally think about Japan when we think of lost civilization, but really it's the whole world that we don't know our true origins. I think that's going with a common talking point that people use. I think it's true, though. We don't really know our true origins. We have guesses. We can guess. But the thing is, no matter where you look in the world, the mountain is sacred, obviously. And the mountain, no matter where you look in the world, is where God comes down to earth. And so when Moses was on the mountain and he's communicating with God, how different is that? Or I should ask, how is that different than this mountain in Japan, where it is said that God came down to the mountain and made contact with man? How is that any different? It's the same exact thing, obviously. And not only that, but this mountain was visited by God, who rode a white horse. And this is a story that you read of Muhammad in Islam. This is a story you read of Jesus. Of course, Jesus represents the white horse of spring, of the apocalypse. The white horse is the horse of peace and light, conquering the darkness of the pale horse of the winter, and of course of the fall, which is the black horse. And then we get the red horse, which wages war, which is why Jesus came for that particular reason. And these are universal concepts, folks. I'm pretty sure that the mass majority of the Secret Teachings audience understands this and knows this, but this is really critically important. It's critically important because whether we're talking about Moses or we're talking about Muhammad, what we're talking about here is a universality, meaning that if you're a Christian, the same kinds of religious motifs and the same kinds of iconography that you find in Christianity can also be found in Islam. And they can also be found, of course, in Judaism. And they can also be found in Hinduism. And they can also be found in pretty much all of the world, including the eastern part of the world. They can be found in India. They can be found in, well, actually in Iran. Iran is technically Western Asia. They can be found in China, Japan, Korea. They can be found all over the world. Indonesia, Thailand, Taiwan. I mean, you name it. Anywhere you go in the world, Australia, you'll find these same concepts because humans see the world in a very similar way. You've got this vast ocean. You've got these vast mountains. You've got intense weather, especially for ancient peoples that didn't have the kinds of living conditions that we have today. And so that means that humans not only see the world similarly, but they also come up with the same ideas. They call them something different, obviously. The mountains are called something different because of different languages and context, but it all means the same thing. And no, I'm not oversimplifying it. I'm not reducing the complexities of the human experience and religion and culture to, well, it's all the same. Who cares? Let's move on. Quite the opposite. It's all the same. So we all should care, and we should stop trying to move on and think that we have all the answers individually and that our religion is the right religion and that our practice is the right practice and that everybody else is just a heathen. Everybody else can just piss off because that's really ignorant. So from Mount Sinai to this mountain in Japan to Mount Fuji, doesn't matter where you go, you're going to find the same idea and the same story. And that's because we're all human. Whether you go to Hakone, Motomiya, Mount Sinai, or if you look at Mount Meru in India, these are all sacred locations, sacred places, and that's where God reaches down to touch the earth, which is why, especially if you read a lot of occult texts, you will learn about the upright and inverted triangle or the Orphic egg. You will learn about how God reaches down like that famous painting and touches the fingertip of man. The mountain is man reaching up to God, and the sky and the clouds are God reaching down to man. And where those 2 points connect, well, that's the ET moment. That's the connection that we make with the Creator. And that's why the triangle, upright and downright, are really important. And when you combine them together, they create the Seal of Solomon, Star of David, or the various other 6-pointed hexagrams that, in a religious sense, actually come out of India, not out of Judaism, and not out of the Seal of Solomon, or even the Star of Remphan for that matter, because India has been around as a culture a lot longer than the Israelites have, and certainly a lot longer than those grimoires of the Middle Ages. And that means that, well, just like with a hexagram, it's just 6-pointed star. In fact, I went to a sushi restaurant the other night and they had hexagrams in there. It's a design. It's a universal design. So this is a universal thing. Now, I'm trying to make this point and drive this point home because I believe this point can help to solve a lot of our problems as humans. A lot of problems like, for example, war. And not necessarily the kinds of wars like world wars or wars that are fought in proxy, but just conflicts in society. Because when we realize that, oh, it doesn't matter if you're Mount Sinai, Mount Meru, or this beautiful mountain in Japan, it doesn't matter where you are because we're all doing the same thing. We're climbing the mountain, we're talking to God. And it doesn't matter if it's Muhammad or if it's Moses or Jesus or it's the God of Japan, which is kind of a misnomer. They all rode a white horse because the white horse signifies the same thing. It signifies the sun. It signifies creation. It's not an actual white horse. And the funny thing about that is I actually had somebody leave it. I think it's on the Apple TST Apple, what do you call it? I don't like calling it a podcast thing because I've always done radio, but it's like the podcast app. And I think it's a review on there. I think it's on there. Someone messaged or left a review. It was one of the few bad reviews. I think it was 1 star. And they said, I can't believe this guy. He actually thinks the 4 horses of the apocalypse correspond to the 4 seasons. What a wacko. And I couldn't help but think, wait, this guy believes that they're physical horses? Like they actually, like, there's a red horse that gallops down from the clouds and like a reindeer on Santa's sleigh and then brings war to the earth, like a war horse. Like it's clearly symbolic. It's clearly, no matter where you go in the world, horses are probably one of the most underrated, far more than even dogs. Horses are like the true best friend of man. Humans wouldn't have been able to do many things without horses, and other animals too, but horses are really the best friend of man. And so horses have always been kind of deified in a lot of ways. And it doesn't matter. Again, if we're talking about Jesus in Europe, we're talking about in the Middle East, we're talking about in Asia, the white horse is a really important symbol. And no, it's not an actual horse that gallops down from the clouds. That's just absurd. But anyway, okay, so that's out of the way. You've seen these pictures. I wanted to show them to you because I actually took them and I had the experience of going up to this mountain. Pretty cheap too. It wasn't expensive. I think we paid like $7 to get up to the top of this mountain and see where the white horse of God came down to the earth. That's not the reason you go there, but that's what they tell you when you get there. Oh, it's just a story. Well, yeah, it is. And so is the story of Moses on Mount Sinai. That's just a story. And so is Mount Meru in India. That's just a story. All right. It's like some people apparently believe and want everybody else to believe that their story of somebody on a mountain talking to God literally is real, but all of the other ones are the works of the devil, or all of the other ones are fake. And when you start to study other cultures, especially if you read Joseph Campbell, I mean, that's the gold standard. You study other cultures, you'll start to learn, oh, it's not just mountains, it's not just white horses, it's not just guardian dogs on the shrines. You see that in Mesopotamia, you see that in I think literally everywhere in the world has the guardian dogs or guardian something, guardian cats, dogs. I mean, in Japan, it's the fox. And I think probably a lot in Christianity, it's the gargoyle, or at least in medieval Christianity, it's the gargoyle. So what do those represent? They represent protectors. They're actually meant to represent, if I pull up this shrine Torii gate again, they're kind of meant to represent what I saw some people in the chat room talking about. They said that the gate, that I used this gate for a promo picture, this gate looked kind of scary. They're kind of meant to represent that. Like, you should not be entering the sacred place if you're scared. You should not be entering the sacred place if you're hesitant, which is why you sink into the water when you take your eyes off of Jesus. And who is Jesus? Who is the truth? And when you take your eyes off the truth, you sink into water. It's not literal water. Nobody's literally walking on water. It's a metaphor. Water is illusion. Water is Maya. Water is not solid. Reality is not solid. And when you walk on it, when you experience it, and you take your eyes off the truth, you can sink into Maya. You can sink into the void. And so the wise men and some wise women of throughout the ages have said, don't take your eyes off the truth. That's where we get the idea. Don't take your eyes off the prize. We're doing this for a reason. Focus on it. That's the intent. Focus and keep your eyes on the prize. Keep your eyes on Jesus. If you keep your eyes on Jesus, you won't sink into the water. It's not literal. It's not literal. It's not literal. And I know it's not literal because I also know that the same stories were told all over the world of various gods walking on water. The same stories are told in India. I document them in my book, Occult Arcana. And India far predates the Israelites, and it far predates Christianity. It far predates pretty much everything. Not only does it predate all of that stuff, but we're talking about like thousands, if not over 10,000 years predates all that stuff. I mean, and the reason I'm discussing this in regard to religion is because there are so many things that people believe that are just absurd, that drive us to conflict with one another. Someone had messaged me and said that the Israelites have the oldest religion. That's why they're the chosen people. And I said, that's not why they're the chosen people. First of all, that's not even the main, mainstream reason. And they said, the Israelites are older than India. I said, do you have any idea how old the Vedas are? Do you have any idea how old Indian culture is? Probably the base root of human culture. It's not Africa, it's India. That's the first thing. The second thing is, like, most of those sacred texts in India, they predate the Israelites, and they predate the Abrahamic foundation by like 10,000 maybe years or more. Like, there's estimates going back to those sacred books in India were written like 9,000, 10,000 BC or before. And that's when they were written down, let alone, I mean, depending on the story you read, there's all kinds of different theories, but we're talking, they're ancient upon ancient upon ancient upon ancient upon ancient. So most of the wisdom of what we call religion has been around for a long time. Humans figured out a lot of the stuff a long time ago. And again, that's important because in understanding all that, maybe we can avoid conflict with one another, and hey, even conflict with other countries as well. Okay, so now I'm going to show you, I will remove that from the screen, and I'm going to show you a little presentation that I've prepared. In fact, I've actually given this presentation before. I gave it at an occult bookstore in Tucson. And I believe I didn't give the full presentation, but I know I've talked about this in the past. And this is my presentation on Shinto. And if you don't know what that is, hang on, I will show you and I will explain to you what Shinto is. Before we can do that, though, there's quite a bit to discuss on the subject and what the word itself means, and to kind of understand the perception of what we're dealing with here. I want to thank all of you again for listening to the show. A lot of new people have tuned into the show. We have Huey Burrito in the chat. We have Cynthia Stock still in the chat. We have Burning Beard in the chat. And Dark Star. Horse Lover mentions the Mahabharata. Yes, a very, very ancient text. And let's see if there's anybody else new. Looks like there's some conversations going on in the chat room. Hendrix or Jesus or Jesus Hendrix is here. And is there anybody else new that's popped in that I see in the chat room? Not specifically. Okay, so thank you so much for tuning in. TSTradio.info, rtgable@yahoo.com. By the way, if you'd like to support us directly, there's a Cash App and a PayPal below on the YouTube or in the audio-only version of the show. Otherwise, you can subscribe and grab a book. And a lot of people have been doing that, so that's really helped us out. Please continue to support us on Spreaker and leave us reviews on Apple. That would really help the show out as well. The secretteachings.info or tstradio.info. Okay, so Shintoism. When I found Shintoism, which means way of the gods, I was stunned. And then when I learned that Joseph Campbell came to Japan and had loved India, had visited India, and was very disappointed in India, and was actually very angry about his experience in India. And then he came to Japan, a place he didn't really know or think much about, and he ended up extending his stay to a very lengthy stay, and found Japan to be one of the most, if not the most fascinating places he ever went. I've got his journals, and he was stunned by Japan because he noticed, and I read this after the fact, like relatively recently. In fact, before I moved, I got the Asian journals of Joseph Campbell, and I had experienced this before I ever opened those texts up, that when you come to Japan, I'm not interested at all really in anime or manga. I do like Godzilla. Did like Dragon Ball Z. I guess that's anime. Do like the Ghibli movies. I like some of that stuff. And I didn't even come for ramen because I can't eat the ramen. I can't have wheat, so I have to be very careful what I eat. I didn't even eat sushi when I was here before because I know some places use grain vinegar for the rice. So I came to Japan for another reason. I came for the shrines. I came to Japan for the kind of, well, it's funny how I'm thinking I want to say this as opposed to how it's going to come off. I came to Japan for the religious experience, except it's not the religious experience that you might think, because it's not really a religious experience. But I came to Japan, let's say, for the history. I came to Japan to see the shrines because I'm fascinated with the shrines in Japan. And I'm fascinated with the shrines in Japan for the same reason that Joseph Campbell was fascinated with these cultural aspects of that are very distinctly Japanese, although they do have same torii gates in Korea as well. So why was I fascinated? Well, because everything that you've ever heard me talk about on the Secret Teachings before, everything is embedded in Shinto. And when I learned that, it genuinely shocked me, because I thought, one, why have I never heard of this religion? Turns out it's not a religion, and turns out it's distinctly indigenous to Japan, so you're not going to hear about it. And two, because it's not a religion, there's no preaching. There are people that oversee the shrines. A lot of them are family shrines, but and some of them there's different levels of Shinto. State Shinto, it's changed over the years. Like the state will run a shrine or a city will run a shrine. They don't preach. There's no text. There's no, there's a creative and a destructive mythos, which is again universal, but there's no books that teach you. There's no 10 commandments. There's none of that stuff, which makes people think, oh, it's a pagan religion. Actually, quite to the contrary. First of all, pagan means religion of the country people. Shinto is universally practiced in Japan, meaning that in Japan, it's not a pagan religion, because it's also not a religion itself. It's not a religion. It's actually a way of life. It is, as I also read in Joseph Campbell, it's kind of like the purest form of the Secret Teachings, because there's no preaching to it. There's no text. There's no church service. There's no institution. There are organizations that help to run and preserve the shrines and the cultural aspects of it, but there isn't anything that's even remotely similar to the institutional nature of religion in Japan, in Shintoism. That's important, because despite the fact that that's a fact, upwards of 80+% of Japan practices Shinto. And here's the wild thing. Most of them don't even call it Shinto. It's just a way of life. In fact, when my wife told her mom about me and said he practices Shinto, her mom, who goes to shrines all the time, they had just actually gone to a shrine when she told her this last year. And her mom said, "What is Shinto?" She did not know what Shinto was, but they go to shrines all the time. How is that possible? That kind of is a really confusing thing, even for somebody like myself who specializes in this type of let's say, knowledge or research. It's kind of confusing to me. I don't really, I get it, but I don't really understand it. You practice something every day, but you don't know what it's called. You do something every day, but you don't really have a name for it. How is that possible? Well, that's because Shinto means way of the gods. It's just a way of living, which means that Shinto is just the divine plan of God. It's the waking up in the morning, fulfilling your duties to your community, your family, yourself, praying at the Kamidana, which is your God shelf. Kami, Dana. Kami is spirit or God, and Dana is shelf. So it's your God shelf. In fact, I should show you that I actually have a Kamidana myself. And I actually had one of these in America too. They're just really hard to find because nobody practices Shinto, of course. I had to order one from Japan. It was really expensive. I sold that actually to Nexus Occult Books in Tucson. I think Andrew at some point was going to put that shrine out and then donate some of the money to the local Japanese garden there in Tucson. But yes, I have a kamidana, and I want to show you this kamidana. We'll go back to the slideshow. This is my kamidana. It's right outside the studio here. And for a lot of people, I understand. I know that it's pagan. It's a shrine to the devil. It's a shrine to the evil things in the world. Actually, quite the contrary. If you look really close at it, you'll notice something in the center. It's a mirror. The mirror doesn't reflect the devil. It reflects you. You're not worshiping the devil. You're not worshiping a god or even a spirit. You're acknowledging maybe your ancestors. Maybe you're acknowledging the local god or the energy or whatever it is. But ultimately, you're praying to yourself, not because you have the power of the universe and you're a god and screw everything else. No, it's because you're looking in the mirror. It's called self-reflection, which is why the moon reflecting light is the great reflector in the sky, which is why the moon has always been the home of a god or a goddess. Famously, Jehovah's Witnesses. Jehovah is the moon god, which is really what the Muslims worship. They worship the moon, the reflector. So when the Muslims have the moon and they look at the moon, well, that's basically like looking into the mirror in Shinto, which is interesting because you've had Muslims come to Japan and vandalize Shinto shrines because they don't have, the inclusivity of including Islam, which is dumb for like an infinite number of reasons, because Shinto accepts everything, because it's not really in a position to accept or deny it. It's not a religion. It's not even a practice. It's just, you just live it. All of that's kind of confusing to people that are zealots about their religious beliefs. But you look in a mirror in the same way that, Jesus, you want to live the life that is in the footsteps of Jesus. You want to reflect in the footsteps of Jesus. You want to reflect and live that life. That's the idea, or at least one of the ideas. Okay, so understanding that, I think, brings us a lot closer to the truth. I think it brings us a lot closer to each other. I think it brings us a lot closer to peace, whatever that peace might be. Shinto is a mixture of what we call Eastern and Western, or what I call Eastern and Western magic. It's what I call it. That's not an official designation. That's what I call it. And when I give this presentation, it's important to show a map of the world, first of all, because you have Western and Eastern, Northern and Southern hemispheres. And if you break the world in half, okay, if you're a flat earther, I'm not interested in having that CIA discussion tonight, okay? I'm not saying the earth is a ball. I don't think it's probably a ball. I think it's a mixture of different things. I don't think it's flat. I think that's the CIA. But regardless of what you think about that, please don't get me started on that. Here's the map of the world. Just for visual purposes, if you split the map in half, most of Africa is technically the Eastern world. In fact, most of Europe is technically the Eastern world. And if that is the case, then all of these political arguments or religious arguments about Western civilization, it's Western civilization that built the world. Not really. It's actually Eastern civilization. And no, that's not biased toward Asia. It's biased toward Africa and Europe, because technically most of Europe is Asia. A lot of people don't know that Syria is Asia, that Iran is Asia. We didn't bomb the Middle East, folks. We bombed Asia. And that's a really important distinction if you're going to understand religion, its history, and especially if you're going to understand magic, or if you're going to understand the history of magic, or tonight, Shintoism. Africa is technically Asia. Europe is technically a lot of, well, not Asia, but the Eastern world, which most people assume that just means Asia, which it doesn't. It's like most of the Middle East. It's technically part of Europe and Africa if you divide it right down the middle. Okay, so the world was not built by Western civilization. It was built by maybe the middle of civilization on a map. Well, that's too literal. Yeah, literal things matter. The definitions of words matter. The definitions of things matter. That's a really important distinction, yes. Okay, and then we can look at Asia. What is Asia? Because we typically think that this is the Eastern world only, which I just showed you that it's not. And it includes, of course, Asia, you have Russia here. You have, Japan, you have Malaysia, India, Pakistan. I mean, that's all Asia. Again, technically Iraq and Iran, technically Syria. I mean, technically Israel is in the Eastern Hemisphere. Technically. I think that's important, don't you? If we're going to use terms like Western civilization, and especially if we're going to use terms like Western or Eastern magic, probably would be a good idea to define what we see as the West or what we see as the East. And in the same way that we divide those things, the world itself is divided in a spiritual way. Nature is divided in a spiritual way, right down the middle. That's what Daoism is. Lao Tzu wrote the Tao Te Ching around 500 BC, an important date, as you'll see. Though the concepts of Daoism are much, 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 much older. And the Tao teaches that humans and animals should live together in balance with the universe. I think that's pretty logical, at least try to do that. After death, the spirit joins the universe. Tao is the path or the way. Some people pronounce it Tao. Some people pronounce it Tao. I say Daoism. Daoism teaches the Qi. That's the energy that guides and is present. That would be kind of like the feeling of God, contact with God, the feeling that there's something else there. We have the yin. The yin is female, passive, emotional, dark. But it contains a droplet of the yang. And the yang is male, active, logical, and bright. It contains a droplet of the yin. In India, these are known as yab yum. In Japan, they are known as in yo. I think that's interesting because I always thought it was just yin yang. And there are various names for this all around the world. Christianity has this same concept embedded in it too. So does the Persian Mithraism or Zoroastrianism. Good and evil, light and dark. You don't need anybody to explain this to you from a religious point of view, right? You know this. There's a light and there's a dark. I can make my screen go dark right now. That's darkness. And then I can make it go light again. That's light. It's embedded in everything we do. Open your eyes, close your eyes. Open your eyes, close your eyes. Light and dark. You're happy, you're sad. You're tired, you got energy. Light and dark. Good and evil. So that is the underlying essence of nature, of God's divine plan, which is the way of the gods. And Shinto itself means Shindao. It's the Shindao. It's the Tao. And Shindao and Shinto both come from, ultimately, Buddhism, which comes from India. Buddhism did originate in India about 500 BC, the same time that Tao was forming in further East Asia, although it comes ultimately from India. And it, of course, Buddhism developed from the teachings of Siddhartha Gautama, which I've heard the name pronounced like 400 different ways. And I just, at this point, don't have any idea how to pronounce it correctly. And everybody who tells me how to pronounce it tells me something different. So we'll just say Buddha. Keep it simple. And the goal of Buddhism is to escape the cycle of death and rebirth by reaching nirvana. Now, there's an interesting little detail here. I do not practice Buddhism. And I do not believe in the Buddhist concept of escaping the cycle of death and rebirth by reaching nirvana. However, this concept is not, as it has been portrayed largely in the quote West, it's not really what it means. And I think I've included that in this presentation. It'll probably come to it later. So Buddhism teaches karma. Good conduct leads to positive outcomes. That doesn't mean like help an old lady cross the street and then you can rob her and it balances out. That's not what karma means. That's not what karma is. In the same way that when we read in the Buddhist scriptures about dukkha, it means anything temporary, including happiness and suffering. And when people say that Buddha says certain things, I mean, it's largely metaphoric. There's not a scribe sitting there writing down everything. Okay, what do you say? Just like the red text in the Bible, okay, that's been translated to how many languages and how many conferences and councils have we had and how many books have been kept out. Okay, it's just the general concept is embodied in this idea. But dukkha means anything temporary, including happiness and suffering. So those are the things you shouldn't get attached to. That's the point. You shouldn't get attached to these things. Don't get attached to anything temporary. It doesn't necessarily mean that you should completely get rid of every material possession you have and then just lay on the ground naked in the woods and then just kind of become plant food. That's not what it means. Some people interpret it that way. If you don't want to have a lot of things, that's okay. I don't like having a lot of things. And I'm happy with being very minimal. And I like that aesthetic as well. But when Buddha says that you're supposed to give up these things, it doesn't mean that you give up food. It doesn't mean you give up clothing even. It just means that you give up happiness and suffering as emotional states that you hold on to. Like you always have to be happy. And that's one of, I think, the most delusional things that we find in New Age, largely Western New Ageisms that take from Eastern religions and try to form them into, well, they usually form them into cults. This is the kind of stuff that, like, usually left-wing political hippie girls with belly piercings and a lot of tattoos and very little perspective or context for life, usually some daddy issues, like to be abused, and so on and so forth. The ones that always tell you, be happy all the time. Like the Joker cutting his face so that he can smile all the time. That's delusional. And Buddhism teaches to get rid of that, which is interesting because a lot of New Age Western cults take from Buddhism and say, you got to be happy all the time. No, that's not what Buddha taught. Buddha said you have to get rid of your reliance on these emotional states. And if you get rid of happiness, that doesn't mean you have to be angry all the time because you're not supposed to hold on to that either. I think Manly Hall wrote something to the effect of tranquility, being neutral in outlook, is essentially the closest thing you can get to the truth. And is that not a profound statement, especially when you compare it to everything that's always going on in the world? Being kind of neutral and tranquil, at least until you learn what's going on, is probably the most accurate reporting that you can get, which is something that I've applied to this show. I don't know the answers, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you I have all the answers. So when something happens, I try to approach it objectively and try to provide context to it. That is living in the path, or living in the footsteps, or walking the footsteps of Buddha, even though I'm not a Buddhist. You don't have to be a Buddhist to walk in the footsteps of Buddha, in the same way you don't have to be a Christian to walk in the footsteps of Christ. It might sound like that's a blasphemous thing to say, but I know that that's true because Krishna walks a path, Buddha walks a path, Jesus walks a path. Shinto means the way of the gods, the way. The Quran, I've read it. I know what it says. It says Allah is the way. Oh, I'm not going to follow that heathen God. No, it's Arabic for God. It's the way of God. So just like any other religion or any other thing you think about regarding gods or goddesses, it's a universal concept because ultimately what they represent are expressions of something else. And that's why Jesus is so easily linked to the sun or linked to something like the white horse, because, again, like Muhammad rode a white horse. It's a white horse of the apocalypse, the springtime. And that's why the white horse came down on the top of that mountain in Hakone and brought information to humans, just like Moses on Mount Sinai, or just like the stories of Mount Meru in India. It's all universal. Now, for those of you who might think this is a very, very common idea, I showed you my Kamidana, and you see that mirror in the middle. It's a reflection of self. That's a pretty powerful thing. This is an image I took actually from a lot of the images in this presentation are images I took from my trip here to Japan last year. But this is an image of a Buddhist temple. And one of the criticisms that I've heard about stuff like this is, oh, these Buddhists worship golden idols. They're heathens. Burn the temples. It's like, well, okay, first of all, you don't know anything about Buddhism. That's the first thing. Okay, so if you don't know anything about it because you've never read anything about it or you've never experienced it, you don't know what the F you're talking about, first of all. Second of all, they don't worship the golden idol. But it is a gold idol, and they pray to it. No. The Buddha is essentially like the mirror at the Shinto shrine. I'll show you some bigger ones a little bit later on in the presentation. It's basically the mirror. The Buddha is the spirit. It's the soul that transcends. So you are looking upon the Buddha as an example of what you are attempting to do. And that is to transcend the physical self, not by killing yourself to rush into heaven, and not by trying to force yourself to be happy all the time or be sad all the time because you misunderstand what the dukkha is, or dukkha, or however you pronounce it. I really frankly don't know. I don't speak the language. But it is the idea that you're supposed to approach life in tranquility, and you're supposed to approach life with a balanced point of view and not be drawn to one extreme or the other. And the gold is reflective of a high quality. Like heaven is paved with golden streets, right? Does that mean heaven is idolatrous to want to go to heaven? It's paved with golden streets, pearly gates, pearls and gold. What does God have a need for pearls and gold? No, these are just valuable things that humans see, and we put them into a position of reverence, and they are aligned with our spiritual beliefs because, well, gold is a very thing that signifies and represents wealth. And what could be more wealthier in a spiritual sense than the soul? So the soul and gold go together. You're looking into a mirror. It just looks like a golden idol. Okay. And that's the second thing. The third thing is when you go into one of these temples, as is famous in parts of Korea, but especially famous in Japan, you take your shoes off. And this is actually one of the best parts about living in Japan, is that nobody, I'm kind of joking, but I'm kind of serious. Nobody looks at you weird when you take your shoes off when you walk inside, which, at least in my experience, has always been something that's bothered me. Because in America, I did have a friend in America, my friend, one of my friends named Joe, and he'd always respected my place. If he came over, he took his shoes off. Big shout out to Joe and his family and new baby and all that on the way. I just would always be looked at. Why do you take your shoes off? Because they're filthy. That's why. I'm not going to wear those in the house. Why would you? I mean, how many roommates I've had or people I've dated that wear shoes in the bed? Who does that? It's really nice not having to worry about that over here. Things that otherwise we looked at as weird. But why do you take your shoes off when you walk in the Buddhist temple? Is it because they just put down really expensive flooring and they don't want you to damage it, like the blue carpets at Joel Osteen's church in Texas, where he wouldn't let people in after the hurricane because he just redid the blue carpets? No. It's because this is a sacred place. That's why you take your shoes off. The home is a sacred place. That's why you take your shoes off. And we read that in Exodus. Do not come any closer. Exodus 3:5. God said, take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. So whether it's in Exodus or it's in a Buddhist temple in East Asia, same concept, same idea. The Buddhists didn't get this idea from Exodus and thought, yeah, well, let's incorporate that into Buddhism. No, it's a universal idea. You take your shoes off before you enter the sacred halls, the sacred shrine, the sacred whatever. Your home is also sacred. This is a very, very important thing to understand because it is, I think it should be more, but it is a universal idea. It's a universal concept. These are sacred places. Take off your shoes. Or if you're a fan of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, like I am, God said, take off your sandals because he was about to give, he's about to give you a new sweet ass pair of shoes. Okay, so now we have Zoroastrianism. Let's look at Zoroastrianism. Zoroastrianism was formed around the 6th century BC by Zarathustra, or the Greek Zoroaster, who wrote something called Time Without Bounds. The Zendavesta is a collection of Zoroaster's religious writings. In those religious writings, he talks about what is essentially the Tao, the yin-yang, the yab-yum. He talks about Ormuzd and Ahriman, which are the creative powers of the universe. That's really interesting because we're getting more kind of west from the Far East, even though again, India and Africa and all that's technically the East. But we're moving a little bit away from these parts of the world, and we're moving into like Persia, Iran, and here we find Zoroastrianism. And Edward Gibbon, in his History of the Roman Empire, writes, he said, Persians alone reserve, or actually, let me zoom in. Let me see if I can read this. Persian alone reserves his religious adoration for his friend and protector Ormuzd, and fights under his banner of light in the full confidence that he shall, in the last day, share the glory of his triumph, which is the idea of defeating darkness. That's the end times, Armageddon, the apocalypse. That's also in the writings of Zarathustra. I'm sure they stole that from the Christians. I'm sure, yeah, because the Christians had it first. That's right. The element of Ormuzd, Ormusd, if you want to look the name up, is fire and light, the sun, whom the Persians called Mithra. After death, the soul is judged in this philosophy. We can see here light and dark, heaven and hell, God and the devil. In this Persian religion, white represents purity, red represents fire, spirit, soul. Have you ever seen the flag of Japan? It's a white flag with a red dot. Have you ever seen what the Hindus wear in the center of their head? The bindi, red dot. Why do you purify your body? Why do you cleanse your body? It's the temple of the soul, temple of the spirit. You purify it and cleanse it, you make it white, and then you put that red dot in the center of the head. It is a universality. And where these things have spread from a central source, India is largely that central source. Mithraism is an astrological religion as well, because Mithra slays the bull. Mithra represents the changing of time. The bull is Taurus, and many depictions you can see the various other zodiac creatures in the image. Now, I've also pulled some references here. I did this for my book, Occult Arcana, from the Tao Te Ching, which we referenced earlier, written by Lao Tzu. And these are compared to Bible verses. I think that this is really interesting. For example, if you read, we'll zoom in here so it's easier to see. If you read Matthew 22:39, it says, love your neighbor as yourself. But if you read Tao Te Ching 13, love the world as your own self. You read Matthew 8:25, you of little faith, or ye of little faith, why are you so afraid? Tao Te Ching 23 says, he who has not enough faith will not be able to command faith from others. If you read Luke 6:27, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless this who curse you, or bless those who curse you, pray for those who mistreat you. Tao Te Ching 27, the sage is good at helping everyone. For that reason, there is no rejected person. Therefore, the good man is the teacher of the bad, and the bad man is the lesson of the good. John 7:18, whoever speaks on their own does so to gain personal glory. But he who seeks the glory of the one who sent him is a man of truth. There is nothing false about him. Tao Te Ching 56, those who know do not talk, those who talk do not know, which kind of makes my job irrelevant, right? Although that's not what it means. I just always think that's funny. I talk a lot. I guess I don't know what I'm talking about. And then the final one here that I pulled, Matthew 6:21. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Tao Te Ching 70. The sage wears rough clothing and holds the jewel in his heart. Now, this was written officially, okay, this was written around 500 BC. Roughly. That means, again, roughly, we're talking, even if this was written in 500 Common Era, it's verbatim what's being taught in the Bible. It's verbatim. Why is that important? I think it's obvious. It's important because what we're looking at here is the same philosophy. And let's just say, for example, let's just say that this was written, let's say 500 Common Era. Just as this, let's just say it was. People would say, well, it came after Christianity. So that must mean that it stole from Christianity. Well, I don't really think any of this stuff is stealing. It's called adopting and adapting, first of all. But second of all, it's the same philosophy. It doesn't matter if it's Lao Tzu or it's Jesus Christ. What does that matter? What am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to hate my neighbor because Lao Tzu told me to love them? Am I supposed to, I don't know, like talk a lot and be ignorant because Lao Tzu told me to not talk? Am I supposed to like ignore the treasure in the heart and not let the spirit in, not acknowledge it because Lao Tzu said that I should hold the jewel in my heart and have rough clothing? In other words, like what's inside matters more than what's on the outside. And that doesn't necessarily mean physical appearances. That's not necessarily. Am I supposed to treat people poorly because Lao Tzu told me to treat them kindly? Okay. But the Tao Te Ching was written long before 500 Common Era. Okay. And that's really important because that means that the Christ philosophy is the same philosophy that has been found everywhere in the world. And where did this Chinese philosophy come from? It came from India. And it far predates the Abrahamic faiths. In fact, it's really the foundation of the Abrahamic faiths. I mean, yeah, Yahweh is a tribal God, but the essence at the core of the Abrahamic faiths is the same thing that we read about from Lao Tzu and many, many others. Many, many, many others. So here's something I call the Eastern Jesus, Buddha, because Buddha is the Eastern Jesus and Jesus is the Western Buddha, although Jesus is not really not really Western. You can't be a guy with brown skin, despite what the church tells you. We'd assume brown skin, wandering around the Middle East, reportedly even visiting India. And if you read the Talmud, the Bavli, which is the main Talmud, despite what Charlie Kirk tells you, don't let me get started on that. My God, the Talmud tells you that Jesus went to Egypt and learned magic, and in fact, Jesus tattooed his body with some of the scriptures and brought them back from Egypt. That's what the Talmud says. Oh, you can't trust that. Okay, well, what about India? He supposedly went to India. There's even a town here in Japan that claimed Jesus came to Japan. So, regardless of that, the point is the story of Jesus, as we perceive it as a Western story, is not a Western story. At I'd say at base minimum, it's a Middle Eastern story. Technically, it's an Eastern story too, but we say it's Western. Okay, it doesn't really matter. If you compare Jesus and Buddha, what do you get? Jesus was crucified on a cross made out of wood from a tree. We assume it was probably a tree, unless they had synthetic wood back then. Buddha was enlightened under the bo tree. Jesus was tempted by the devil in Matthew 4. Buddha was tempted by kamamata, by desire, just like in Matthew 4. Jesus doubts the people, essentially. Father, forgive them. They do not know what they do. Luke 23:34. Buddha does the exact same thing. When he speaks to the highest authority, the highest power, he says, I don't think the people understand my teachings. And he's told to proceed with teaching because you have to give people a chance. Jesus is the savior of mankind. Buddha, the savior of the universe and redeemer of the world. In John chapter 14, verse 6, we read, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Buddha is the way also. In fact, we know it in Buddhism as the way of the Buddha. And here is an example. Obviously, these are not real footprints. It's not Bigfoot. It's not aliens. But this is in Kyoto. There's actually several of these kinds of Buddha footprints that you can find all over Japan I'll show you another pair here in a little bit, but this is in Kyoto. This is a pair of Buddhist footprints. Why footprints? Because you're supposed to follow in the path of the Buddha. That's why. Walk in his footsteps. Matter of fact, when I went to one of my favorite places in Japan, I went down to Hiroshima. And when I got down to Hiroshima, I didn't know anything about the area, but I ended up visiting a place called Itsukushima, which is an island. And when I visited that island, I was absolutely shocked at what I found. First of all, they also have a torii gate, one of the most iconic in the world, one of the most iconic locations in the world, certainly the only really iconic torii gate in the world, one of the most iconic locations in Japan. And this torii gate is very similar to the one in Hakone I showed you. But when I climbed the mountain, there's a path. I didn't really hike it, just like walk the path up to the top of the mountain on this island of Miyajima. You see the Itsukushima shrine below on the water, which, by the way, it walks on the water. It was built to look like it is hovering above the water, so you're walking on water. Same idea. And I found this temple, the very top of the mountain, where you see the footprints of Buddha. There's footprints of Buddha, and then there's an entranceway down below the temple. And there's a sign, if you look at it, I zoomed in here so you can see, I'll read it to you. There's an entranceway for a ritual called Kaidan Meguri. It says, walk through the underground corridor running beneath the main hall in total darkness, and touching the key set just beneath the sacred image is believed to purify your impurity to be reborn. I read that. I got so excited. I was like, oh my God, I know what this is. This is the death and resurrection of Christ in a Buddhist temple on the top of a mountain on an island in a bay in Japan. That's really cool. Really, really cool. I thought that was cool. I don't know. Maybe you don't think it's cool. But I also took a video of it. I don't know if the video, I don't think it'll play on here, but the video shows you walk past that sign and into a dark room and you can't see anything, and you walk through the corridors like in the stories of the Egyptian initiations, and you can't see anything. You just have to trust your touch and your sense, and you're dead. You're underground. It's dark. There's a shaft, just like in the pyramids, that points up out of the temple. And then you leave and you are, as the sign says, reborn. It's a Christ ritual. I think that's pretty cool. You follow the footsteps of Buddha into the underground crypt, and then you resurrect into the sunlight, and you see the true light of Christ, true light of God, etc. This is the place where you come into contact with the rising sun and become a son of God. That is in Buddhism. That is in Japan, ladies and gentlemen. And it has nothing to do with Christianity, which, instead of disproving Christianity, wouldn't that kind of prove it? Wouldn't that kind of mean that, yeah, the story's not unique, but it's true? Christ was crucified at Golgotha. That is the Hebrew Golgoleth, which means skull. What is the spine of the human body? And what's attached to the top of it? Well, that's the tree of life and the skull. And the thieves on either side of Christ are the hemispheres of the brain. This is why I do not believe that a man named Jesus Christ, which would not have been his name anyway, was crucified physically on a tree and had two thieves around him and then resurrected physically. I don't believe that at all. I think that's a fairy tale, but that doesn't mean I dismiss religion. In fact, the power in that story is beyond measure. In fact, if you read the stories of the Romans, they usually didn't crucify people for these kinds of things. So that's a whole nother story. Okay, some of these pictures we'll probably skip through because of the timing of tonight's show. This is a red Buddha And this is at the temple. If you touch it, you're supposed to get healing powers. The Benzuru Sonja get healing powers. Just like, hey, touch Mother Mary or baby Jesus at a Catholic church, maybe you get some healing powers from that. Okay, we'll look at some Eastern and Western magic. And the reason that these things are absolutely the same, because no matter where you go in the world, you take a line, draw a line, then you draw another line, you connect them together. Well, you got a cross, you've got an X, that's what marks the spot. You turn it, you've got a circle, you've got the Eye of Horus, you've got the Eye of God, the Eye of Providence, you've got the Vesica Pisces. If you split it, you got the Hammer of Thor, you got the world split in two, you've got the Tao. You expand that into looking at the cross, the four quadrants of the world, the 5 points of the body, the head, the ends of the hands, ends of the feet, the Ankh. And the inversion of all of these things is evil. Live, evil, life, efil, love, evol. Live, life, love, evil, evil, evil. In the same way that Lucifer is fire. Lucifer is fire, and Lucifer is the one who deceives you through those burning desires. That's why you have to give up the desires, like Buddha says. Can't hold on to happiness or sadness. You certainly shouldn't focus only on happiness. That's delusional. And then there's Satan, the adversary. That's just the adversarial thing. I mean, Lucifer can be Satan in that sense because he is a tempter. He's the adversary. And the devil is cold death, because the devil is devil. It's lived. So if you reverse lived, you're not living, you're dead. The devil is cold death. And then we look at the spirit in relation to the four elements. And we find the same thing in the far, far east. The spirit is replaced by wood, air by water, water by fire, earth by metal, fire by earth in terms of the correspondences. That's the far eastern version of the pentagram. Same thing. Same exact thing. This temple here is called Ingyoji Temple. This is actually where they filmed part of The Last Samurai. I didn't know that until after I had visited the temple. And you'll find at that temple, you'll find these deities that are depicted. What do you think those deities represent based on that pentagram? They represent the elements. They represent the 5th point, soul, spirit, fire. The 5 wisdom kings. 5 wisdom kings represent the directions. They represent the spirit of the world. I think that that's pretty straightforward and obvious. If you just look at them, oh my God, there's fire. It must be the devil. Actually, it's the opposite. That's the spirit. And then I can't probably keep that on the screen very long because they'll censor me and I'll probably lose the channel on YouTube at least. What you see on the screen right now is a swastika. Oh, it's the opposite. It's the same. It doesn't matter which way it turns. Yes, it means something slightly different, but it's the sun. It's the turning of the wheel. That's what it means. And we'll skip through some of these slides here because we have limited time on the show tonight. Those are just Eastern and Western magic. Let's go back to Shinto itself. And we'll also jump into the chat here and we'll welcome some other people such as Flux, who joined us in the chat. We have, let me scroll back up. We have, how do you pronounce your name? Sonam Ebel in the chat with us. I mean, all of our other listeners I mentioned earlier. Jessica Rash is in the chat with us. Welcome to the show. Jessica says, nonsensical that people cannot see the community or the commonality of the religious philosophies. I agree with you. Sadly so. Sadly so. Believe whatever you choose to believe, but there's a commonality between them all. Banba is here. It's hard to see on my screen because I have this thing zoomed. I can zoom in a little bit here. Yeah, Banba is here. Banba says, same with the mosque. Is weird to wear shoe inside the house for me anyway. Always remove them. Yeah, you should. And you're right. Yeah, take them off at the mosque. You should take them off before you go into the church too, and the synagogue. You should take off your shoes. It's a holy, sacred place. Brendan is here, or Brandon is here, excuse me. These are really small on my screen. Brandon is here. And any other names that pop up to me that's being new in the chat. I don't see anybody else. Let's see. Well, I probably could get into a discussion on Jesus with Nate in the chat, who says lots more historical evidence for the story of Jesus than pretty much any other story from ancient history. But see, that's the thing I don't understand, Nate. There's evidence of the story, but the supernatural components of it and the philosophies that are embodied in it and by it are identical to virtually everything that came before and everything that came after. They're universal. They're everywhere in the world. And I actually think there's a legend in the Arab world about the Muslim community, how the Muslims viewed Christians, because they respect Christians. The Muslim, I love this line. The Muslims said that we love Jesus, we respect Jesus, we honor Jesus as divine to some extent, to some level. He's divine, he's inspired divinely. The problem with Jesus is not Jesus. The problem with Jesus is his followers. They went crazy one day. They crucified him, and they're not talking about the Jews or the Christians. They're talking about, well, they're about the Christian community. They crucified him and his image and turned him into a god and blasphemed his teachings. And frankly, although I'm not a Muslim, that is essentially what I believe about Jesus. I'm pretty sure that whoever that was, there was a real person. In fact, there were probably many Jesuses and Messiahs. And the stories are like, there's legitimacy to the stories, but nobody physically walked on water. I would bet a lot on that. And I would bet a lot that nobody physically was healed from blindness. That's people being blind metaphorically. And I would say that, like with the crucifixion, we're talking about the spine, we're talking about the body, we're talking about the head. And the translation of these words literally relate to the body and the two hemispheres, the two thieves. So like you can still believe that this was a real person to some extent. We could talk about this in a separate show. I just don't think that it has anything to do with I think that the spiritual components and the philosophies are separate things. Spiritual in the sense of like Jesus being God. That's a separate thing from the philosophies. The philosophies are real. I don't think the person who taught them. In fact, I don't even think, quite frankly, I don't even think that early Christians really fully believed that. The story, like any other story, it's largely a metaphor. Like our God rose from the dead. Well, like we all rise from the dead. We all realize that we are something other than a physical body. I think that's all it means. And no, you're not derailing me, Nate. I think that that's an important distinction to make, considering that there are so many Christians that listen to this show. I think that's really an important thing to note. But again, it's also not ultimately that these kinds of things are not even relevant to the underlying theme of the show tonight, because we are talking about the universality of all this stuff. So let's look at. We're going to blow through this last part of the show, and this is the real meat of it. Last 30 minutes here. The Japanese creation myth. Tell me if this sounds familiar to you. Light and heavy forces gave birth to a trinity called the three kami that further birthed 7 other generations of kami, 7 days of creation. You want to explain to me, anybody, how in Japan, way away from that Bible world, they had 3 forces that gave way to 7 generations, the Trinity and the 7 days of creation, which led to the birth of the first people, or some of the first major gods that led to the first people, Izanagi and Izanami, who are kind of like the Adam and Eve, and how they create land from the rainbow bridge. The rainbow is the gateway or the portal. It's the bridge that takes you in Scandinavian mythology, Japanese mythology, universally. It's in the Bible too. It's a promise from God, right, to not flood the earth. It's the pathway between heaven and earth. So Izanagi and Izanami, they come on the rainbow bridge and they create land, and then they dance around the marriage pillar, which is ultimately the Mayday pillar. And I think there's a typo there. It says mirage pillar. Should be marriage pillar. Izanami speaks first and births a child. This is a great story. Izanami speaks. This is the woman. She speaks and she gives birth to a child. But because it was only done from the female perspective, it was halfway complete. And so the child is actually missing its physical structure, which is the masculine Izanagi. and the physical structure, meaning the bones. And so the child named Ebisu, which became the god of luck and fishing, is placed in a basket and put on the ocean. Is someone genuinely going to sit there and explain to me and tell me that's not like Moses? That's not like Osiris? Are you going to sit there and explain to me and tell me that story is not even, it's like it's not related to even Krishna or Jesus, the infanticide, the hiding of Jesus, just like the story of hiding Zeus, hiding Jupiter? Actually, Horus was hidden. Jupiter was hidden. Ebisu was not hidden, but put in a basket. Moses, Krishna was hidden from infanticide. It's the same story. Same exact story. Now, Izanagi speaks with Izanami, and they create, now together, they create the rest of the islands, the grass, the mountains, the fire god, Kagu Tsuchi, who then burns Izanami, and she dies. But humans are birthed from this. Izanami goes into the underworld, Yomi. And the story of Izanami in the underworld is basically Persephone and Orpheus. It's the same story that we find in Greece, except this one is in Japan. So I guess people say, well, the Japanese just stole all this from Christianity. How? It's an island nation. It was relatively, even with the exception of Westerners, quote unquote, arriving in the 1600s, these stories are way more ancient than that. In fact, that one temple I showed you in Goji, I think it's in Gyoji temple, that temple is like dated, that temple complex, it's been rebuilt because it burned down. That complex is dated at the time of Christ. It's dated to around year 0, which means that around that time, those concepts were already fully developed in Japan, or before it was what we consider Japan to be, thousands of years ago. Now, Izanagi goes and visits his wife in the underworld. He has to escape without her because, well, essentially he looks back, if you know the Greek stories. The Japanese creation myth involves Izanagi leaving the underworld to cleanse himself in water. He washes his left eye, his right eye, and his nose, which gives birth to 3 additional kami known as Amaterasu, Tsukuyomi, and Susanoo. My wife made me practice pronouncing it before. Susanoo. I think that's correct. Susanoo. And these are the gods of the sun, the moon, and essentially weather. Well, the right eye, the left eye, sounds like the eye of Horus, sounds like the eye of Odin. Same exact thing. Some of you might have seen the image of Amaterasu. You spell her name if you want to look it up, Amaterasu. And you'll notice in the depictions, you'll find the sacred mirror reflecting the sunlight. That's why it's covered in flames. It also has the tomoe, which is the symbol of the Trinity in Japan, one of them. She comes forth from the cave after 3 days, and there's a Christmas tree with another mirror on it because they decorate the tree and they give thanks to the sun coming back to life. That is called the solstice. That is called the winter solstice, bringing it back to life, the world. So, once again, we're talking about something quite universal. I love this. It's one of my favorite paintings because it's got the Christmas tree, it's got the reflective mirror of fire, and it has the motif of Jesus coming from the cave. What did the Japanese they stole that from the Christians too? Like, give me a break, folks. Come on. It's a universal story. She went to a cave for 3 days and was resurrected. Well, that painting was in 1860. Yeah, but the story is thousands of years old. Because again, it doesn't matter if you're in the Middle East or if you're in Japan or if you're in the Americas, you all see the sun, unless you're in the Southern Hemisphere, it reverses, but you all see the sun as dying and resurrecting. In fact, I'm pretty sure that early church leaders openly stated this. It's a whole nother show we could do. They openly stated that they had to incorporate the, quote, pagan elements, although Christianity was pagan, the pagan elements into the Christian religion as it formed or the quote pagans wouldn't have adopted and adapted to it like they hoped that they would. That doesn't mean that Jesus, I hate Jesus. The Jesus stuff really gets on my nerves. It really gets on my nerves because it's like saying, you know, I mean, that's one of the other reasons people really hate America, frankly, from the outside world, because America just tells the whole world, we're better, we're better, we're better. Our Jesus is better than your Jesus. It's like the same story everywhere else, and other countries have freedom. So it gets really annoying when people just constantly talk about these things and say Jesus is the best and America is the best. Like there's a whole world out there, and a lot of cultures practice the exact same thing as call it. They worship a deity called Allah. What an evil creature that is. It just means God in Arabic. Have some culture, you swine. All right, so take a deep breath. This is the sacred mirror. It's a really important symbol in Japan. It's also a really important symbol globally. The mirror is used to coax the sun goddess from her cave by reflecting her beauty. The mirror is tied to a tree decorated with jewels, which is surrounded by celebrating deities. That's the Christmas tree. The shimenawa, or shide, or anshide, are placed in the entrance of a cave to prevent the permanent return of Amaterasu. It doesn't prevent the absolute. It just prevents the permanent. So she can go in. But there's a limit to it, to the cave, which is essentially that's how we know also that it's the winter solstice. And then they place sakaki branches on either side of the both in regard to the cave, but also the shrine itself, or the kamidanas, the Shinto shrines, because those branches represent basically another version of the Christmas tree, or the evergreen, or the pine tree, fir tree, or what else? What do we use during Christmas? Holly and stuff like that. Okay, so what is a kami? Kamidana. I said kamidana earlier. What is a kami? Well, a kami is basically a spirit. And if you want to pause the show, you can read this 18th century scholar Motori Norinaga, and he writes about the kami and what they are. That in essence, they're a place, they're ancestors, they're plants, birds, beasts, mountains, oceans. They're all that. Mount Sinai is a god. Mount Meru is a god. Mount Fuji is a god, but not in a blasphemous sense. And as I referenced earlier, religion, or religare, means to bind. Aslama means to submit to God. And Masubi, which is the divine plan. If you look up the word, it's really hard to translate this particular word into English, because you type it in to the internet, usually you get like some kind of sushi or some kind of rice dish. But if you type in the word, and I think I put masubi. My wife says musubi, but it basically means to be bound to the divine plan. Well, it means harmony and unification. I believe it's spelled M-U-S-U-B-I, not M-A-S-U-B-I. But it means to be bound to God's plan, essentially. Same concept that we see everywhere else in the world. Okay, so what exactly is Shinto? Unlike Buddhism, which sees life as suffering, Shinto sees life as largely positive, with certain, quote, negative or non-positive elements. Although Buddhism doesn't really, ultimately it doesn't really think or portray life as being all about suffering. That's kind of the pop culture idea. It kind of suggests that you should let all of that go, the happiness and the sadness, because it's all temporary, it's all transient. Shinto, in that sense, also doesn't really teach that you should always, it certainly doesn't teach you should always be positive, but it sees life as being more positive, but bad things can happen. So you have to keep an eye out, and therefore it creates kind of the same balance you find in Buddhism. In Shinto, it's misfortune. Misfortune is only that which is warped, crooked, polluted, or diseased. So if you don't bathe yourself, you become negative. You don't clean your house. You wear your shoes in your house. That's all bringing misfortune, because dirt is associated with evil. There are also moral and societal crimes and lesser crimes in Shintoism. According to Motohisa Yamakage, who wrote in the Essence of Shinto. You can find virtually no books on the subject because they don't really have books, but some shrine owners, some families have written books about them. Yamakage-san writes, in Shinto, heaven and earth and humanity are different manifestations of one life energy. It's all the same thing. And heaven, like with hell, is a state of mind. Heaven is, well, kind of like the happiness. Hell is kind of like sadness. And hell is cold. That's when you feel betrayed. You're betrayed by somebody. It's really cold and it's kind of depressing. And, that's basically the idea. It's kind of like when they say, this is obvious, I think, but you don't get to eat in heaven. You don't get to eat in hell. Have you ever heard that? Why? Well, obviously you don't have a body. But the other reason is because when you get really sad because someone betrayed you or you lost a love interest or something, you don't want to eat anything. In the same way that when you're super happy, you're not thinking about food. In a state of bliss, I mean, food is, it's a bodily function, not a spiritual function. Okay, so Shin or Shen Dao, is the God spirit way, the way of the God, the way of the spirit. In fact, Daoism or Dokyo means teaching of the way. Daoism means the teaching of the way. In fact, the worship of Amaterasu or Amaterasu Omikami is referred to as the way of Ise. Jesus says that he's the way, the truth, and the life, right? In the Bhagavad Gita, he who does my work and reads me as the supreme God, who is devoted to me and without hatred for any creature, he comes to me. That's in the Bhagavad Gita, which is exceptionally older than the Bible, the concepts that are embodied in it. That doesn't mean the Bible's wrong. It means the Bible's right. It just means it's not the only correct text. Also, Anubis in Egypt is associated with cemetery or death god known as, I believe you pronounce it, Upwat, a name which translates to the opener of the ways, like the way. The Quran says, oh, that evil Quran. Well, why does the evil Quran say this? He will show them the way and better their state and will admit them into gardens with which he has acquainted them. Well, what about those 72 virgins? It's not in the Quran. Buddha is said to have walked the middle path, and in the Kabbalah, we have the middle pillar of mildness. So what we're looking at here is we're looking at Daoism, Shintoism, Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, Egyptian religions, mystery religions, and Buddhism. And they all have the exact same concept embodied, the exact same idea of the path, which, hey, did you watch The Mandalorian? This is the way. Same idea. There's different types of Shinto. If you want to pause the video and read about that, you can. There's shrine Shinto, domestic Shinto, state Shinto, and so on. This is what a typical Shinto shrine looks like. It's important to describe this because you have the main torii gate. Usually you have a second torii gate as well. And when you enter that torii gate, you are entering the land of the gods. And that's why you'd probably be surprised by this. I was when I came to Tokyo, the biggest city in the world. You go to Ise Jingu Shrine, you don't hear anything except nature. It sounds like in the middle of Tokyo, mind you, it sounds like you got lost in the woods. I mean, Tokyo's already, I think, one of the most quiet cities in the world anyway, but it's like you got lost in the woods. And when you enter there, you bow at the entrance to pay respect to what is inside, and what is inside is the spirit. And usually these places are located in the woods, which is where, yes, that's where the ancient peoples used to go to worship God. This is the place where you would find, usually at a spring or a little pond, you would find the naked goddess. You would find Artemis. You would find Diana in the woods. You would find the goddess of the woods. Go into the woods, the trees. That's where you'd find the rings. That's the Lord of the Rings. That's Saturn. Saturn's the tree. You go into the woods, you find Osiris is in the tree. Jesus is crucified to a tree. Buddha is enlightened under the tree. Odin is crucified on a tree as well, or hanged on a tree. So you enter this shrine, this sacred place, It's outside, so you don't have to take your shoes off. But if you go into like a central area, which at most Shinto shrines you can't, because that area is off limits. Buddhist temples, which are similar to Shinto shrines in a way, you do take your shoes off, but you wash your hands first. It's called temizu. Te is hand and mizu is water, so it's called hand water. You wash your hands, purify your mouth. There's a certain ritual prescription for it, and then you go into the inner shrine. And you'll notice that there are guardian dogs, lions, dogs, gargoyles, foxes, because there's different versions of Shinto. The fox god is protective, and that developed out of foxes protecting rice fields in Japan. Obviously, a big place to get rice. Which, by the way, you have rice in Japan, you will never eat rice anywhere else in the world again. They have perfected the rice here in this country. Okay, so anyway, that's what the shrine looks like. It's in a sacred location, like a grove, a grotto, which is, I'm pretty sure, the original translation of the biblical story that Jesus was born in a grotto, not a stable. And a grotto is also where Mithra was born. And it's both literal and figurative. It's literal as in an actual cave, and then it's non-figurative in the sense that it was literal. That we're talking about the cave of Amaterasu, the sun. And that's the place where you go to, like the mountaintop, commune with God. So you can do it on the mountaintop, or you can do it at the base in the womb, which is why you go to the cave, because it's the womb. That's what the Pyramid of Giza is. It's the womb of Isis. The womb of Isis. That's really, 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 really important. The Torii gates. Here are some of those Torii gates I will show you pictures of. Some of these are massive Torii gates. Some of these are in Tokyo. Some of these are Kyoto. Some of these are Himeji. Some of these are, I went all over Japan. There's so many of these gates. Very clean too. This particular one is Ise Jingu. You walk into that, it's dead silent except for birds chirping, or if it's in the summer, you hear the summer bugs. It's like walking into another world, which is the whole point. You are walking into another world. And a lot of these shrines on the top of hills or mountains, you have to walk up a staircase, and that staircase is the stairway of the gods, the individual journey, like the staircase in Solomon's temple, reportedly. This is everywhere you go in Japan. You're walking upstairs to get to the shrines, because they are little mountains where God is. And you have the fox deity protecting the shrine. You find this in Mesopotamia. Okay, there's Shinto instruments of worship. They have the gohei, or if I pronounce it, let me try, how do I pronounce that exactly? Gohei. You have the shimenawa and the shide, and you have the harai gushi. And these are instruments of purification. They're using white paper. It's literally paper and straw. Purification, cleanliness, which is the harai or temizu and misogi, which is the purification process of washing the hands. Misogi is more for priests. There are some priests that oversee the shrines. They have rituals. They'll do full body washes, but that's baptism. There's a ritual way to do the hand washing. As most things in Japan, there's a very specific way of doing it, but you're washing your hands and you're washing your mouth out. Cleanliness. Wash your mouth out. Cleanse it of what you've said, and wash your hands, the things that you've done. Washing away sin, essentially. Very simple way of doing it. These are some pictures I took. The one on the left is from Miyajima at Itsukushima Shrine, which levitates and walks on the water like Jesus does. You offer food, drink, cloth material, symbolic objects, money. The money is only meant to go, you put in like what's equivalent to like 1 or 2 cents US, and that just goes to maintaining the shrine. Then there's a prayer etiquette as well. You bow and you clap your hands and you pay your respects. Pretty simple. And you're praying in the mirror, which I will show you of. And then you have a symbolic feast. These are in the ritual aspects of Shinto. You have a symbolic feast. Food is very important, like all religions. You also ring a bell. Just like church bells, you ring a bell. Church bells are rang because, or they are at least present because they are meant to ward off evil. Why? Because they're harmonious. Evil is disharmony. You ring a bell also to alert the gods that, hey, you're here. You're about to pay your respects. It's not just the gods, though. It's yourself. The bell prepares you, and it prepares all the spirits of your ancestors. Make sure that everybody is here to worship, to pay their respects. It's just a thing about recognizing where you are and being present in the moment, if you will. That's it. I think that's kind of cool. And if you look here, this is down near Ise Jingu. This is another one of the mirrors in the shrine. You're bowing to the mirror. You're worshiping yourself. That's satanic. No, you're worshiping the spirit, which is God. It's the same thing. Here are some other examples. Some shrines in Japan. I know if you're listening to the audio, you can't see this, of course, but you can watch the video presentation later. Here are some more mirrors. This picture I took directly of myself because I wanted to show you I'm in the mirror. You can buy the hand mirrors as well. This is one of my favorites. This is in Kyoto. This is a beautiful shrine, and you can see the mirror there at the top. As I showed you the actual temple layout or the shrine layout, it's mostly the woods. It's a place of worship in the woods, and you take the path of God. Most of these shrines are called jinja. The jinja are the places of worship. That's where the spirit or deity is enshrined. But when we say spirit or deity, we're talking about soul, the spirit of the place, of the ancestor, of you, of the world, but also things like the personifications of nature. For example, one of the yokai or monsters in Japan is called Yamabiko, which means the mountain echo. And there's two words in Japan that I really love, kotodama and otodama. Kotodama means the spirit of words. Otodama means the spirit of sound. There's a spirit in everything. Just like you say you have school spirit. You're not talking about an actual entity. You're talking about an energy, something you feel. Right? That's the spirit. This was my old Kamidana. I don't remember why I put that in there, I guess just to show people. You see these ropes, if you've ever watched anime or you watch Japanese movies or TV shows or you play games, you'll see these ropes with the Shiminawa shide wrapped around them, or the tree rather with the Shiminawa and the shide wrapped around them. That lets you know that there's a spirit in that tree. It's a wise old tree, like Lord of the Rings. Mount Fuji is the place, by the way, it's called the Altar of the Sun. And that's because it's the pyramid with the all-seeing eye at the top, the altar of the sun. That's also the place where the elixir of life is made. The elixir is the transformative substance. That transformative substance is, of course, the transforming of the sun throughout the year. Fuji is an important part of that. This is called Meioto Iwa. These are the wetted rocks. Very famous spot, one of the most iconic spots in the world, especially in Japan. And I found this interesting. Right there next to those rocks, you can actually see them in the background. There's a shrine gate or a torii gate called the Sun God Torii. And you'll notice that there's these little straw, I think they're made of straw, crosses. Well, that's the sun god crucified on the cross. And you take those crosses, and you know what you do with them? You take those crosses and you place them on a pole. So and the point of the placing them on the pole is just not just because they're being held there so they don't blow away. You're placing them there when you pick them up and put them down because you're transferring, like Azazel of the Jews, the scapegoat, you're transferring your sins to them on the cross and placing them on this altar. You're literally using a cross to have your sins forgiven. Jesus was crucified to have your sins forgiven, right? He was the ultimate sacrifice. That's why the Christians got angry at the Jews. Stop sacrificing animals. Jesus' blood was enough to purify. Now we can purify with the clean water instead. Okay, frankly, if anybody doesn't understand that particular instance right there where you're taking a cross and you're putting your sins and the bad things on it and you're leaving it at the sun god torii gate, that isn't the same thing as Christianity, then yes, in this particular case, you are absolutely and utterly delusional. That's why I took a picture of it. It's the exact same thing, same concept. Same meaning. Here are some of the, this is Itsukushima Shrine. This is Miyajima. It floats on the water. It walks in the water. The water goes down. You can go out to that big torii gate, just like the one in Hakone, except this one's much, I think it's much, much bigger. And there it is without the water. It's pretty, I think it's probably once a day with the tide. And it's pretty fast. You go out there and it's way cooler than it even looks. It's one of the coolest experiences I've ever had in my life. It's really, really fun. It's big. It's massive. It's, yeah, by looks of this picture, it's definitely bigger than the one Hakone. It's probably like 3 times the size of it. There's a lot of deer on that island. This is actually where the rice paddle, in that area, this is where the rice paddle was developed or invented. Some other places I went, you got the floating stone in Japan. And I'm showing you this because, again, it's the walking on water. It's the magical quality of floating on water. I talked about horses earlier. The horse is really important in Shinto because the horse used to be given to the shrines by wealthy families. And when people couldn't afford it, they started putting drawings of horses or paintings of horses on little plaques of wood. They call them emma. Emma are small wooden plaques commonly used to offer prayers or wishes to the deity, which is yourself, or it's the community, or it's the tree, or it's the rock, or whatever it is. Horses are at, this is Hiroshima here. The horses are everywhere. Then you get the omikuji at these shrines. That's called the sacred lot. It's basically a fortune. It's, people say, oh, it's evil. You can't fortune telling. What's that thing you do when you open the Bible and say, Jesus, let me know what I need to know today? Same thing. Same thing, just a different version of it. This is called the omamori. The omamori are amulets used to prevent misfortune. They're actually very similar to the Teflon cubes of the Jews because they put the little parchment with inscriptions from the Torah in them. And that's basically what the omamori is. It's just little pouches with sacred text on them. They're really cool. I've got a whole bunch of them. I've got one right here. This one's for clear mind that I keep here in the studio because I want to have a clear mind. I frankly don't believe it genuinely has power. I don't think this has power. I just think it's cool because I study this stuff and I think it's fascinating. I don't think it actually has power, though. These are the evil destroying arrows. Evil destroying arrows are a very important thing in Shintoism. Here is the Susanoo Shrine. You see the Trinity mark on it again, or the Tomoe, which is pretty common all over Japan. You'll see this. It's called the triple protective amulet against fires, floods, and thieves. So it's kind of like, using the cross to ward off evil. There's the good luck mallet. I love this. This is a mallet that you get I got this at the Susanoo Shrine. And it's really interesting because Susanoo is the god of weather patterns, storms, and rain. His thundering frightens his sister, the sun goddess Amaterasu, driving her into a cave for 3 days. The hammer of Thor likewise controls what? Thunder and lightning. And the mallet of Freemasonry teaches us to do what? Correct our imbalances and anger and tempest in our emotional states. Correct that. That's what the mallet does. Knocks us into place. This, although I would never do this otherwise, I snapped this picture from a distance because I wanted you to see what an actual Shinto priestess looks like. They clean the shrine and they make it very nice, and they sell those little amulets so they can finance the shrine and keep the place functioning. Same thing here. Out of respect, I would normally never do something like this, but this is a goshuin. It's a stamp of pilgrimage to the shrine. I don't believe it has some kind of powerful significance, but I have 2 books filled up with all of the red stamps that I've gotten across Japan. I just think it's cool. And my favorite place, and this is probably it's definitely the most significant in Shinto, one of the most non-visited probably tourist sites in Japan, because it's not a tourist site, it's a sacred grove. It's called Ise Jingu, like Isa, which is Arabic for Jesus, or Isa as in the Giza Plateau, which is the womb of Isis. This is called Ise Jingu. And you go here and you wash your hands, wash yourself in the river. You go up here, and what do you see? This is the temple of Amaterasu, the sun goddess. She is cloaked behind a white veil, very similar to Isis cloaked behind a white or red veil. Same story. Same exact story. And there are other things too, like the owl. The owl is Lakshmi in India, Athena in Greece, Minerva in Rome, Hitotsume in Japan. Owls represent fortune, luck, wealth, and wisdom, and they represent the exact same thing in Japan as they do in Greece or in India. Here is a lucky owl. These are some of the other things that you'll see at Shinto shrines. This was me and my wife, actually, the only picture I included in here, I think, of us at a, I don't know how you would say, like, it's not a love shrine, it's a shrine where you pay your respects to the ones you love. Izusan Shrine. And then you have shrines that are the Gokoku Shrine. Gokoku Shrine are dedicated to the people who have died in defending Japan. So this is Hiroshima, and this is what happened after the bomb. I love this picture because guess what? In this picture, folks, this shrine was destroyed, but the gateway was not destroyed. Now, I'm considering doing another hour here because there's so much more we could probably talk about. In fact, maybe I'll do another hour. This is really critically important here, okay? Because this, you know how those stories are about tornadoes or whatever, hurricanes, they destroy some area, natural disasters. And then suddenly there's one house that survives and God put his hand over that house. Well, it's just interpretive, right? But if you looked at this in Hiroshima, this was after the bombing of Hiroshima. And I don't care whether or not the bomb was radioactive or not, because there's a lot of discussions on whether or not the bomb was very radioactive, considering that Hiroshima has no higher levels of radiation today than it did essentially right after the blast, because they rebuilt immediately. It wasn't supposed to be clear and clean to live in until 2020. That part's irrelevant. The fact is, this is the gateway to the spirit world. And like those homes, or maybe like those churches that aren't destroyed in natural disasters, clearly something protected this. I guess if it's a church and it gets protected, that's God. If it's a shrine, that must be the devil protecting it, right? It's like, frankly, shut the fuck up. That level of fucking ignorance is just fucking embarrassing. It's disgustingly embarrassing. Have some modesty, have some decency, have an open mind, and understand that everybody on this planet, no matter if they're Asian, Arab, or if they're American, essentially believes the same thing. We just call it something different because of cultural context, because of language context, and because of, well, every other context that you need within a culture, or that you have within a culture. That gateway, just like a church. Why do they have the oval openings in the church? Because that is the vaginal opening. That is where you step through after the sunlight has penetrated the rose window, impregnated the congregation, filled them with the light of Christ, and then they leave through the vaginal opening, which is the Vesica Piscis, and that is the rebirthing process every time you go to any church that has a doorway like that. And even if you go to a church that doesn't have a doorway like that, then we're talking about the same idea. It just doesn't have the same symbolic significance. It doesn't matter if you go to a mosque. It doesn't matter if you go to a synagogue. It doesn't matter if you go to church. It doesn't matter if you go to a Buddhist temple. It's the same exact thing. And so that bomb did not destroy the shrine gateway. Shrine was obliterated, but the gateway stood. And the shrine is actually what houses the so-called God, Kami. And it was destroyed. But the gateway was not. Neither were the pillars on either side to light the way through the gate into the spirit realm. This is like one of the most beautiful and yet disturbing pictures. I mean, I love and hate this picture at the same time. It also embodies the Japanese spirit after the bombing, which was rebuild and forgive. And that is really the essence of the secret teachings too. To accept, to deal with, to grow. That's at the heart of Shinto. It's at the heart of the Japanese culture. That's why Joseph Campbell came here and he said, well, I guess screw India. That's a dump. This place is where the true mysteries are. and they're pure. They're unadulterated. That's because this place has remained largely untouched by the outside world for so long compared to the rest of the world. That doesn't make Japan the best place in the world. It doesn't make Japan. It has nothing to do with everything else you know about pop culture. It has to do with the spirit here that is everywhere else in the world. The same spirit can be found. Here it's just been preserved in a more purified way, or a less polluted way. It doesn't mean that Japan is better. It means that Japan is just a rare gem in the world where you can still see a pure form of the secret teachings, a pure form of like the ancient mysteries that doesn't have the pollution of modern pop culture. Although, yeah, during World War II, the Japanese government corrupted Shinto. They took control of it, and they used it in order to promote war. That's wrong. They gave it up after the war, and it went back to the people. This gateway was kept open. Like, the symbolic nature of that is stunningly profound, I think, because the shrine was obliterated. You know, the physical material body of God was destroyed because it's illusion. But the pathway with the lights to guide you on that pathway, the guardians at the entrance are always there, because you cannot physically destroy them, even with the power of the sun. And the gateway that is there is the place you walk through and enter the spirit world. You can't destroy it. You can't tear it down. I mean, frankly, you look at that Torii gate, you look at the lanterns, I don't think they're even really burned. And look at the trees there. What are you going to tell me? There was a directed energy weapon that hit Hiroshima? It didn't burn the shrine gate, but it burned the trees, or we'll start that conspiracy. This is really important. And for context, I don't know if he just joined us, but I see our longtime listeners in the chat. Antonio is in the chat. He says, India and China are much more ancient than Japan. You're totally right. I mean, in terms of the local cultures, not necessarily, and they are distinct, but no, you're totally right. And I pointed this out at the beginning of the show. And even older than China, India is really the cradle of civilization. And this Shinto shrine gate, it ultimately goes back to India. No doubt about that. But India is landlocked, and India has been, for thousands of years, I mean, not that there aren't, it's hard to explain this because it's like Shinto. There really isn't a definition to it. Yeah, there's clans. Yeah, there's war. There's civil war. There's all that happened in Japan too. But as a national spirit, there's a universality and a cohesion in Japan. And because of its isolation, there wasn't a pollution of these things like there have been in places like India. Although people have tried. Watch the TV show Shogun. It's based on I don't know how accurate, but partly true events. The Jesuits tried to corrupt, literally, the Jesuit order tried to infiltrate Japan and corrupt it. Did you know that? Jesuits tried to corrupt the spirit of Japan. That's powerful history to know. And yeah, it goes back to India. And I mean, frankly, we have no idea how old any of this stuff is. But the point of showing you this picture is the light on the path and the gateway itself was not closed. You cannot close the gate of God. You cannot close the spirit gateway, or the pathway to God. You know, you can crucify Jesus. You can crucify Odin. You can crucify Buddha. You can burn them, tempt them. You can kill me. You can decapitate me. You can destroy the body, but the spirit lives on. And that gateway is a physical representation of the spiritual gateway that remains open. No matter how lost or how alone you are, the gateway remains there. You can always proceed through it, even after an atomic bomb destroys everything around it. It does not destroy that gateway. That is a very powerful spiritual symbol. And no, that's not something I read over here. I haven't read that in a book. It doesn't say that at the shrine. It doesn't say that in any of the text at any of the places I went in Hiroshima. This is my interpretation of it, coming from the place where I do have a lot of institutional backgrounds in all kinds of different religions. And then I see this and I'm like, oh my God, how is nobody else pointing this out? That is incredibly profound, very powerful, very, very powerful. Most people know this. They know the bomb dome, but you can go to the rebuilt version of this shrine. You can see pictures of this shrine, and it's this part of the shrine survived. That is, I think, it's amazing. Here is a picture of Himeji Castle. A lot of these castles in Japan, I want to point this out. I think this is interesting. You see the way they're built? Well, that looks like a ziggurat, doesn't it? Looks like a pyramid. The temples in Japan are the sacred holy sites. The castles, the strongholds of the leadership, various different clans and tribes, they're built like pyramids. I mean, if you didn't know any better and you just saw this building, well, I have no context for Japan. It looks, I mean, it's built like a ziggurat. I guess it's just architecture, right? That's how things are built. These kinds of structures are pretty stable, right? A strong base. At the very top, there's a shrine at that Himeji Castle, but it's a step pyramid. Yeah, Nate, it's a step pyramid. Now, I think that's interesting, not because, well, first of all, there are mounds and things like this in Japan that relate to the ancient, I guess, lost cultures of the Americas, the mound peoples of America and Ohio and other parts of the country. I've even read estimates. There's more mounds like that in Japan than there are in the Americas, which I find that really hard to believe because the Americas are absolutely littered with them. But Japan has a lot of mounds too. I'll show you one of those. I think it's in this presentation. I'll show you one of those. I think, I hope it's in this presentation. Maybe it's not. I'll pull up my book. I have a picture of it in my book. But there's something of a lost history here. But the thing is, you build these types of structures because they're very structurally stable. And you see this ziggurat-like pyramidal structure in the building of these temples. Like 98% of it is because that's just structurally stable, which explains away the mysticism of all the other stuff that you see. Oh, they're Egyptian. It's the demonic work. It's like, no, it's called architecture and engineering and construction, and that's just how you build that stuff. The 2% is the spiritual quality that is embodied by the natural construction of things like this. In other words, you find, oh, this structure really, really works well. And then because it works really well, it's one of the best types of structures. Then what you find is, okay, now there's a reason for that. I guess God gave us this structure. God gave us this idea. And so it must be a very spiritual, very powerful spiritual thing. It's like the chicken or the egg. What came first? Well, what came first was the architecture, was the engineering, was the realization that structures like this stand better than structures that are built with, the first floor and then 50 floor. Like if it was reversed and turned upside down, that's not going to stand. I mean, there are buildings like that today with modern architecture, but they're not like these old temples or castles or whatever, right? You find out that works, and then, oh, well, God must have given us the knowledge to do this. So that's why it becomes a mysterious spiritual kind of a thing. And I think that's really cool. And that's why I share it with you. And the spiritual component, kind of like my example, it's like 98%, just reality. If this is what works and this is what stands, 2% spiritual. And if you climb to the top of this large castle, there's a shrine at the top. I think that kind of embodies the idea of what I'm saying. Let's move on to the next image. Some of these images are not meant to be part of this particular presentation tonight. The fox, I'll show you the fox, the inari, the kami of rice and other grains, in addition to commerce and general prosperity. Technically, the fox is actually kitsune. That's Japanese for fox, but the fox is a guardian associated with rice, became known as inari. The white fox, like the white horse, is sacred in Japan. White foxes are also tricksters. And so you have a relationship to the raven, you have a relationship to the wolf sometimes is a trickster. You have these different trickster characters all over the world. Every culture, and Japan has them too. But the trickster, the Joker, is also a necessary evil in many respects. So, I mean, it's like one of those dualistic things again, I guess you could say. And let's see what else we have. Oh, well, this was from Ino Village, kind of unrelated to Shinto, but this is the UFO museum they have there. It's really cool. And Japan actually had a UFO museum before the US did, which is also really interesting. This is a hub of UFO activity. This is one of the decommissioned shrines. They have the god who's blue. Look at the blue god there, just like India. This is called Sengan Mori Mountain. So like Meru or like Sinai or like Fuji, this is a much smaller mountain, but there's a hub of UFO activity here. And people go to essentially experience that spiritual nature. And what the spiritual nature of what's there is the components, the geography, and the geology of the area. It's powerful. That's usually what attracts UFOs. Magnetic rocks, crystals, things like that. It's like same thing with Sedona. In fact, Sengan Mountain is kind of like Sedona in a lot of ways. Here are some more of the fox deities. There you can see the tomoe, the triple protecting symbol, and you can see the bell there that you ring to let the gods know that you're there, or to wake yourself up. King Sweet in the chat. I should go to the chat for a second. King Sweet says, blue chickens? No, they're not blue chickens. They're blue oni. It's not a blue chicken. But I did talk to the blue chickens. Everything's fine, says, like Vedic gods. Yep, just like Vedic gods. So I'm to believe that the Japanese stole that from India, or those concepts spread further east and made it to Japan, or the Oni are red. Sometimes you see these gods as blue. It's just like the Indian gods. It's the same exact thing, folks. It doesn't matter where you go. The owl means the same thing. There's different variations in terms of what it does or the story of it. The owl's the same thing. The blue gods are the same thing. The mountains are the same thing. The story of the crucifixion is the same thing. The story of the cave is the same thing, because we're talking about things that it doesn't matter where you go in the world. There's the sun. There's a giant mountain. There's a giant cave. Blue is a symbol of wisdom and spirituality all throughout the world. The goddess Sophia in Greece, she was supposedly blue, slightly purple, which is also why Christians hang the purple material on the cross, because it's royalty. I see my friend Joey in the chat. He said, David Wilcock taught me about the blue Aryans. That's right, the blue the blue Aryans, the master aliens, the chosen aliens. All right, let's see what else we have in the chat here. I've missed the chat for like probably 45 minutes here since I last referenced it. Let's see what else we have in the chat. Antonio says, wow, I'm guessing you're referring to the blue gods. It's pretty cool, isn't it? Oh, yeah. Huey Burrito says, Ryan talked about a tunnel at a shrine once before. I don't know if somebody else brought that up in the chat, but hey, since we're going another hour, or at this point another 45 minutes, I'll show that to you again. Let me pull it up, and I think it was toward the beginning of the presentation. Maybe was it after? It's a pretty big presentation. By the way, when I gave this presentation originally, it was supposed to be like an hour. It turned out to be like 2 hours and 15 minutes, and they closed the store on me because it was too long. I need to learn to be able to reduce this stuff to more coherent, more straightforward, simpler, shorter presentations. Give me one moment. I think I can pull it up. If I can find it here. Okay, we're just going to do this. I'll click on it and I'll scroll back through it until I see it, because the little samples of the pictures are too small. It's close. I think it's close. Yeah, here it is. Okay, so whoever might have been asking about that in the chat, this is the This is on near Itsukushima Shrine. It's a Buddhist temple on top of Miyajima off the coast of Hiroshima. Pretty cool, huh? I think that's cool. Okay. I don't know what this means. Piet Vonder, Japanese tunnels, I'm sure. Guessing. I'm scrolling backwards here, so I'm seeing like the end of conversations. Let me go back to the beginning. Oh, King Sweet. Yeah, this is actually a really interesting point. Yeah, Japanese techniques for building, they don't use nails. They use wood, which is really, really cool because it also is part of the cultural element here that is embodied at places like Ise Jingu, which I was showing you on the screen. I'll scroll back down to that because places like Ise Jingu, this beautiful shrine, you see that? They tear that down every 20 years and rebuild it. They tear it down and rebuild it. Why? To remind you that life is impermanent, which also has, I think, a lot to do with explaining. We don't need to talk about this tonight. I did do a show on this before, but it goes a long way to explaining that conspiracy about the World's Fairs. Why would they build something and then tear it down? You know, they built the Chicago's Fair over a period of like 10 years. It wasn't built in a year or 6 months or a year and a half, like they say. It was they built that like for some cities were building it before Chicago got the bid, and then they had to repurpose it or tear it down because Chicago got the bid. So the World's Fair in Chicago, they built it over a period of 10 years. Yeah, you could definitely build that stuff in 10 years, especially if you have enough manpower. And so the context of that's important because why would you tear it all down? Well, they didn't tear it all down. They repurposed a lot of it, first of all. Some of it's still standing today, contrary to what the conspiracy theorists say. And second of all, well, look at this in Japan. They build this all made by hand, virtually no machines. There's a museum where they have a documentary. They show you how they rebuild this temple every 20 years. It is pristine. It is the definition of perfection, and all the painting, everything's done by hand. And it's one of the less decorated shrines because it's all about purity and simplicity and the aesthetics. This is the Ise Jingu Amaterasu shrine, the white veil, just like Isis or the wedding veil. And they tear it down every 20 years. So why would somebody build something and then tear it down? Well, there's a philosophy here. You want to remind people of the impermanence of life. That helps you to respect life. That helps you to respect nature a lot more. That's, I think, really, really, really cool. Nate said something about Babylon, and I saw some other people in the chat mentioning. Did I see some other people in the chat mentioning Babylon? Ancient Babylon or the Babylonian mysteries? I want to make a note about that. I think that sometimes the Babylonian mystery thing is overused. I think it's like one of the only things or first things that people are introduced to, because that period that's being referred to, I mean, typically the period that's being referred to is like 6th century BC. So roughly around the time that Buddhism and Daoism were forming. We know that India had obviously a direct line into what we call the Babylonian Empire. And we know that when we say mystery of Babylon as it's referenced in Revelation, and we're talking about the Babylonian Empire, like when we're talking about the Roman Empire, I think that there is a necessity to mention that it's not as mystical as a lot of people might make it out to seem. And I don't, in my opinion, I might be wrong about this, I don't think that it has anything directly to do with, let's say, the occultic Illuminati motif in the way that people say that it does. And I think that because I was introduced to all the same talking points, and then as I got older and started reading like hundreds and hundreds of books and all this stuff, I started to learn that a lot of the things that I thought were misrepresentations of things that were not meant to be taken literally. Yes, they built cigarettes. So did the Egyptians. So did the people in South and Central America. So did the people in China. And the Chinese culture is way older than Babylonia. So they built pyramids in China way before ancient Babylon. And although modern, what we call religion in the far, far east, you know, if we're talking about Japan specifically tonight and Shintoism and stuff like that, and there's Christianity here, by the way. Nagasaki was the home of Christianity, and the Americans decided to bomb the only Christian community in Japan, which, little piece of history you might not know, Nagasaki was the capital of Eastern Christianity, and the U.S. government decided to bomb Christians. So whatever that's worth, put that in your pipe and smoke it and see what it does. Think about that for a second. But this stuff is like the temple of Ingoji, where they filmed part of The Last Samurai, that place in Himeji I showed you. That temple complex dates back at minimum 700 Common Era. There are parts there, I read some of the signs. It dates back to the time of Christ. So that means that this stuff, it didn't strictly come from, Babylon the Great. And a lot of that stuff is metaphoric. It's like when we say the Roman Empire is the world. It's like, well, it was kind of the known world, kind of, but it's not like the world itself. There's so much metaphor. It takes, if you broke down these words, you break down the word Jesus, you break down the jihad, you break down the infidel, you break down the word Christ, you break down the word Messiah, you break down the word veganism. It all means something different than what we assume that it means. Veganism is vegetarianism mixed with the concept that you don't eat any animal products. And it doesn't mean that you don't eat meat. Did you know that? Veganism doesn't mean that you don't eat meat. Every vegan would disagree with you and say, no, I don't eat meat. I don't eat animal products. Okay, well, I mean, with the exception of fish here or there, I don't eat animal products either. Any. I hate cheese. I hate milk. I hate all of it. I think it's gross. But like, if I wanted to eat a steak, I could eat a steak and still be a vegan. You know why? Because you can eat meat as a vegan. Veganism just means doing less harm. In fact, let me show you something on my phone. I have not eaten an egg for, what's it been? 15, 16 years roughly. And I did eat an egg recently. One egg. And then I had several eggs because of what the egg was, where I ate it. I wanted to participate in this little ritual. And when my wife and I went to Hakone, I was afraid I was going to be allergic to eggs. First of all, I thought I might be allergic. I haven't eaten them also for 15 years. I'll show you this on the screen. This is in Hakone. This is the big black egg. And they have this big hot spring here. It's all the rage. There's like what look like Pokemon and Hello Kitty black eggs. And okay, so I tried the black egg. Okay, this is the egg, the black egg container. And I ate one. Here's what the egg actually looks like. I'll show you a picture of it. I think I have a picture of it peeled partly. I'm looking on my phone. I didn't send this to my computer. Do I have a picture of it peeled? Yeah, I have a picture peeled. Okay, here it is. So here's the egg peeled. I ate that. And yet I'm still a vegan. You know why? Because veganism means doing less harm. And it's the same thing when you describe what Jesus is. What is Jesus? Well, it's Jesus. It's Zeus. Jesus is a title. Many people name Jesus. There's somebody in the chat named Jesus. Christ is the anointed one. Christos, Krishna. Messiah is to be anointed by. In Egypt, it was the mesa of the oil from the fat of the Nile crocodile. Messiah is the chosen one. There's lots of chosen ones. The Jews don't think Jesus was chosen. They're waiting for their Messiah. The Muslims have their own version of this. Okay. And then the Messiah in other contexts is the anointed one. It's the person that realizes, I could have had a Klondike bar, or I could have had a V. Is the V8 not Klondike bar? Excuse me. I could have had a V8. Is it V8? I think it's V8. Could have had a V8. Could have had a whatever commercial it was. I don't drink or eat any of that stuff. But like, I'm a spirit. I'm not a physical body. When you have that revelation, boom. Now you're resurrected and you're reborn again. Now you're a Messiah. You're the chosen one who came to save yourself from destruction. The soul saves the physical body from destruction. That's a powerful thing to understand. So when you look at these words, they usually mean something different than what we assume them to mean. let's go back to our presentation. Kitsune the fox. Okay, this is a really up close picture. Look at those candles. It's demonic. So demonic. You ever seen a Catholic cathedral? Look at that mirror, though. That's why I'm showing you this. Look at that mirror. The foxes are the guardians. The mirror is you. And I mean, the whole point of the ritual is just to. The whole point of the ritual. Yes, thank you, Flux. What would you do for a Klondike bar? I'll tell you, I do a lot of things to not eat it. I would do a lot of things to not have that put in my body. I don't know what I'd do for a Klondike bar. Nothing. I wouldn't do anything for a Klondike bar, but I would do a lot of things to not be forcibly fed it. Maybe it could have had a V8. I think that was the commercial for V8. Again, I'm like, I just ate an egg for the first time in 16 years, and I'm not going to eat any more. Okay, I just ate it because I wanted to try the black egg. It's supposed to give you 7 more years of life. So you guys have 7 more years of me to deal with from whatever the point I was supposed to die whenever the Mossad decides to assassinate me. I've got 7 extra years of life. It's like, I got additional cat years of life here. So I don't have any. I don't eat or drink any of that. I have no idea what any of this stuff is. I don't know what I just know V8 isn't juice, and I know Klondike bars aren't food. So put it that way. Okay. Anyway, this is the mirror. There's a very up close version of the mirror. I think that's really interesting because when you look at it, the light is the soul or the spirit, that burning desire you have, and it reflects in the mirror with your face. That's really interesting, isn't it? I think it is. I think it's cool. I mean, part of the whole ritual aspect, the whole ritual process, this is one of the cart pulling festivals in Narita, Japan, that I saw when I lived here. Part of the process of these rituals, okay, whether it's transporting of the festival cart at this point, this was in the fall into the winter when I was here before, or the springtime festivals. It's not just a matter of like honoring nature. It's about you doing something like, when you lay in bed all day, you don't accomplish anything. Instead of doing that to nature, you go out and acknowledge nature. You work with nature. You acknowledge, yep, time for the fall. Yep, time for the winter. Yep, time for the spring. Yep, time for the summer. And you transition with nature. You transition with the universe. And that's what the whirling dervishes are. I'm not a dancer, but that's what dancing is. Whether it's hula dancing in Hawaii or it's the Maiko or geisha dances in Japan, the perfection of the movements, you're aligning yourself with something higher and more authoritative and more powerful than you. That's why you move your body. That's why you cleanse your hands, wash your body. You do some prescribed order of things, not because God's going to get really mad at you and kill you. You don't. But it's about bringing your attention to the matter at hand, which is why Jesus says, go in the closet and pray. I don't think Jesus meant go into your walk-in closet in your house in the suburbs and pray. I think he meant go inside of your head. In fact, many people interpret that particular text from the Bible, I am one of them. I interpret that as actually meditation. Go into your head. Don't let yourself be distracted by the outside world and pray. That's what meditation is. That's not, Jesus didn't teach meditation. That's heathenistic. It's just, oh my God, he hates Jesus. No, actually, on the contrary. Jesus taught meditation, I think. I don't know for sure. That's how I interpret that verse. Go into your head and you go into the closet. There's like 5,000 different translations of it. But you go into a secluded area and you let everything else go and you focus it's not just prayer. Okay. That's meditation. That's what meditation is. Patriot Girl says it's all Jesus did. Yeah, I love Jesus. Okay, I also love Amaterasu. I look at Amaterasu as not being a person. It's the sun. And I mean, like when I asked my wife about this stuff, she just said Amaterasu is sun. I mean, I knew what Amaterasu was, but when actually the first date we ever had, she saw the book I was reading and I showed it to her and it had Amaterasu in it. She said, "Oh, you know Amaterasu?" I said, "Yeah, absolutely. She's my favorite goddess. I'm going to go to Ise Jingu." And she said, "Amaterasu is son." I said, "Oh my God, marry me. You don't think that she was a real woman that came down from the sky and talked to people and then went into a cave for 3 days and then physically walked out of the cave and then floated back up into the heavens and disappeared. Holy shit. You know it's a metaphor. You know it has to do with the winter solstice. Please marry me." And she did. So we're moving on to the next part of the presentation tonight. Oh, actually, I put this in the present. I think, you know what, actually, frankly, I've noticed like 3 or 4 typos in this presentation. And I've noticed that there are some things in here that are missing. I think I pulled up the original draft of this presentation. In fact, yeah, I think this is labeled Shinto 123 or one. I label it 123 or 132 or something. Yeah, this is like a. This must have been the original draft. That's now I'm embarrassed because I spelled 2 or 3 words wrong and I have pictures that are missing. Damn it! I pulled up the wrong draft of it. This was the one that I had exported and sent to somebody, and then I ended up editing it more. Okay, that doesn't really matter. Neither here nor there. But anyway, I put this on the presentation, the Dashain, which is the Great Harvest Festival of Nepal. It's a time for family reunions, exchanging of gifts and blessings, etc. That is the same universal thing that you have in every part of the world, and that's what this cart pulling festival is here in Japan to bring in the winter months. Here is Ise Jingu, the shrine itself. This is one of the papers about the shrine, where it is. It is east of Nara, south of Nagoya. And if you want to pause the video to read this, if you want to read it, it tells you how old it is, what it is, and the subsequent shrines that are on the property. Amaterasu no Miya, Takanomiya, Tsukiyomi no Miya, and Toyouke Daijingu. And shows you the priests, and here's the history of the shrine. Now, I love this part. This is really going to piss some Christians off, but I'm going to read the history here in Japan. Amaterasu Omikami, let me pronounce it correctly. I have to transition between Japanese pronunciation, English pronunciation. I'm still trying to work on that. Amaterasu Omikami was originally worshipped in the imperial palace by successive emperors of Japan. However, during the reign of the 10th emperor, Sujin, the holy mirror, the symbol of Amaterasu Omikami, was moved from the imperial palace because the mirror was self-reflection, folks. And that was the center of Japanese worship, the mirror. You know, when people say you can't look at yourself in the mirror, they feel horrible about themselves. Well, we have mirrors in Japan historically because you want to keep your house clean, you want to keep your body clean, your mind clean. You look in the mirror, you want to be reminded that things are nice and clean and perfect and beautiful. You did that. Patriot Girl in the chat says Christian mystics knew this. Absolutely. Then during the reign of the 11th emperor, Suinsin, or actually, let me zoom in. Is that what it says? It's really grainy, the image, because I'm zoomed in so far. Oh, Emperor Suinin, the emperor ordered his princess Yamatohime no Mikoto to seek the most appropriate place to permanently enshrine and worship Amaterasu Omikami. After searching in many regions, finally the princess received a revelation that Amaterasu Omikami should be enshrined and worshipped eternally in Ise, which is again the name of Jesus in Arabic and the name of the Giza Plateau, the womb of Isis, who has a veil put in front of her face, just like at the Amaterasu shrine at Ise Jingu. A veil is placed in front of her face. I'm sure that's not a coincidence. And it goes on to say this. It is approximately 2,000 years old, 2,000 years ago. In the era of the 21st emperor, Yuryaku, about 1,500 years ago, Toyoke no Omikami was, in accordance with another revelation from Amaterasu Omikami, summoned from the north of Kyoto Prefecture and enshrined at Ise. Okay, so hold on a second. I see Flux in the chat. We wouldn't know the difference about the language. I know, but I'm a perfectionist. So it's got to be pronounced correctly or I'm going to hate myself. But you did a 3-hour show. It's so good. No, I pronounced that wrong. That stuff really eats at me. That's why I've got chronic tension and stress. But you notice that it says it is approximately 2,000 years old, which means that the worship of Amaterasu in its current form is as old as year zero. It is as old as the stories of Jesus Christ. And it's the same story. So here's the problem. You either have to admit, okay, maybe Jesus went to India. Maybe Jesus went to Japan. Don't think that's what it was. Or maybe you have to admit that the Jesus story was blended together with, quote, pagan stories, although Christianity was pagan. Paganism was not pagan. It was the state religion of Rome. Well, kind of. They were religiously tolerant of even the Jews. And it was the Christians and Jews that created problems for themselves, but that's a whole other thing. Point is, either Jesus came over here or they see the world the same over here that everybody else sees the world. And it's like this development of this idea of the Son dying and resurrecting. And how that, like Christianity and paganism, were kind of blended, or paganism and paganism were kind of blended, as I say sometimes. Pagan, because pagan's the religion of the country people, and it's the religion that's not really practiced, which means if paganism was pagan Rome, that's what was practiced. Christianity was the religion of the people on the outside. So Christianity was pagan Christianity. That's what the word literally means. We get into the etymology of it if you want, but that's what it actually means. Okay, so either Jesus came over here. Don't think that's the case, although there is a town that has Jesus, his grave, which is I just think that's interesting, up in North Japan. I think it's south of Hokkaido, far away from where I am. Okay, or they're all seeing the world the same way, and they all see the Son as dying and resurrecting, and they enshrine that and deify it. Okay, or maybe our history is not what we've been led to believe, and there was, as these ideas developed in one part of the world or the other, they spread out and they made it to places like Japan. I think the first is not true. I don't think Jesus came to Japan. The second is the most likely. We all see the world the same way. And there's a tiny bit of truth to the fact that, yeah, there's probably a lot of things like Jomon pottery was found in the archaeological digs in Brazil. Yeah, it could have been brought there after the Jomon culture, but I mean, it was found in archaeological digs, reportedly. I mean, that's a whole nother show we could do, which means that it was found there from a long time ago. And Jomon are like 300 BC to 10,000 BC or something, or right around the time of when Amaterasu started to be worshipped in Japan. 2,000 years old. I mean, the story of Amaterasu is the story of Jesus. It's the same story. Joseph Campbell noticed this. He's not the only one. I noticed it independently. You want me to be honest with you? Everybody thinks I read Joseph Campbell so much. I didn't read Joseph Campbell till last year. I had no idea about his work. I mean, I knew about his work. I didn't have any idea of exactly what it taught. You know, you hear the stories about the power of myth and how that's an important book in Star Wars, but the complexities of his work is stunning, profound. It's one of my favorite things now that I've read it. I've read most of the main stuff, and it is telling the same story. That's why I like Joseph Campbell. I guess it's kind of a personal bias because all the things I noticed from reading independent books over the years are things that he compiled into a series of singular books or a series of books and wrote it way better than I could have ever wrote it. And he noticed the same thing. So, I mean, I don't know what you want me to just, it's kind of like all the other stuff we talk about on this show. It's controversial. No, it's just history. It's just history. Well, maybe the Japanese are trying to be like the Christians. What do you think the world revolves around Christianity? You know, that delusion is the same reason why the Jews were hated in Rome. Because no matter how much rope The Romans gave the Jews. They still rebelled. They still clashed with Roman authorities. And they still claim to be the masters of the universe and the chosen people. You can understand why the Romans might have had an issue with them at some point. Same way with the Christians. The Christians pissed the Romans off because the Christians didn't want to participate. They rejected everything that was Rome, which was history, ancestors, community. That alone is offensive. The Romans still allowed Christians to practice. The problem was Christians decided to burn Rome. At least that's the story that at least all the very, I think, credible historians tell. The Christians burned Rome. Why would the pagans burn their own temples? I mean, you got Christians running around, burn the temples, and then they burn. Oh, the pagans did it. That doesn't make any sense. That's like saying 9/11 was the result of Orthodox Muslims. That's dumb. It wasn't. It's really dumb. Okay, but the Christians and the Jews were largely the authors of their own destruction during the Roman Empire. Not exclusively, but largely. And there's records of this too. There's records of Roman magistrates being like, dude, can you just shut up for a second? Look, I don't want to kill you. Half the people here don't want to kill you. Can you just shut up for a moment? And like, you want to practice this, practice it, but shut the fuck up about it. Okay. I don't give a fuck about this Jesus. Okay. Just shut up about him. Kill me instead. The Christian, actually, there's like I think there's like 200 and something records of the martyrs in Rome. A whole nother subject, okay? But like, there's literally, I think it's 200. I want to say 271. It's over 200, less than 300 cases of Romans killing Christians. But the reasons they killed them were because the Christians said, "We don't care. I want you to kill me because that makes me a martyr for Christ." So it's a historical fact. Not every case, but it is a historical fact that a lot of Christians wanted to die for Jesus. And the Romans were like, dude, I don't really want to do this, but I guess you want me to light you on fire for Jesus? Sure. Because the Romans didn't want to incite, they had a tolerant policy for religion. Let's put it that way. Okay, I'm getting way off track here. History. Japan, Shinto, Amaterasu, 2,000 years ago. And that's when, it's kind of dated to approximately 2,000 years ago. Do you think that the pre-Japanese people woke up one day and said, hey, there's that big ball of stuff in the yellow stuff in the sky. Let's make that into a god and worship it? No, that stuff develops over decades or centuries or thousands of years. I see Nate in the chat says, don't know about your historical events there. Well, I'm sorry, Nate, but that comes from Edward Gibbon, who is the most authoritative author on the Roman Empire. And it's considered the most, in fact, not just Rome, it's considered the most accurate and it's probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest, one of the most historically accurate and historically referenced in terms of his background books on history, period, let alone Roman history. I can show it to you if you want to see it. I think you can get a copy of it. I'm not saying that out of spite, by the way. I'm just saying, like, if you want to get a copy of it, I think it's like, what did I pay for it? Like $12. There's different versions though. So they have like a new version that's been updated in terms of like introductions. And then there's like the Penguin Classic. The Penguin Classic is really hard to believe. Or not believe, excuse me, hard to read because of the way it's broken down. At least that's how I feel about Penguin books, the way it's broken down. But there's all kinds of different versions. You can get it online too, probably for free. But it's considered the most authoritative historical book ever written, and it's without doubt the most authoritative historical book ever written about Rome. And he describes, I mean, like, my God, there's like hundreds of pages just on that issue of Christianity and Judaism alone in the Roman Empire. And this is like, it's called the decline and fall of the Roman Empire. That doesn't even include the pre, the foundation of the Roman Empire and the kind of the middle part of it. So anyway, I just think that, yeah, everybody should read that book if you want to understand more about the rise of Christianity and where Judaism stood too. I mean, early Christianity welcomed all kinds of horrible people into its midst because they were all like, well, I can rape and murder and kill and steal and be forgiven and then go do the same thing again. Sign me up. I love Jesus. So that's kind of got corrupted right away. Whereas the Jews would say nobody can come to our religion. The Christians said everybody can. And it's like, maybe there should be a middle ground here. Or maybe we shouldn't worship central figures. Maybe we should just like honor the sun. And the Japanese were doing that 2,000 years ago. The same, well, longer than that, but 2,000 years ago. Same as Christianity. Here is some of the stuff they do at Ise Jingu. All the white, purity, white, like the flag of Japan. And of course, going back to that painting I showed you earlier, my favorite painting. Look at this painting. Go back through this. Look at this painting. This is from 1860, Utagawa Kunisade, or Kunisada. This has the sacred mirror. It has the Trinity. It has the fire, the spirit, the soul. This is the inner self, mind, body, spirit. Here's the Christmas tree, the mirror. Here's the sun in the cave, and also the vaginal Bicyca Pisces opening. Coming out of the world. The goddess of the sky and the goddess of the earth. It's all in that painting. It's a beautiful painting. Okay, so let's see what else we have here in the presentation, ending with some concluding thoughts and some stuff in the chat. What else do we have in the chat room here? Okay, how old are the samurai? This is from Noka. I think, did someone else ask the same question earlier? Let's see here. Is there anybody? I think someone else asked about samurai earlier. Oh, what's the connection between samurai and Shinto? Well, I don't know if there's like a connection in the sense of like there's a unique connection. It's just that they would honor, everybody here honors the shrines and the sacred locations. Let's see here. Anything else in the chat? Oh, Gnarly Sheen is here too. I don't think I mentioned him earlier. Where's that? Okay, here it is. I'll go back to this. Okay, how old are the samurai? They're like what? 11th, 12th century or something roughly. But how old are the teachings of Shinto? That's another thing. There's no date to it. They just are. Because ultimately, let me explain to you what Shinto is. Shinto is this. You get up. Okay. And you wash your hands, clean your mouth out. And you bow twice, clap your hands like the bell, pray into the mirror, and then you get up. Most people just like bow, clap hands, pay respects, and walk away from their little kamidanas at home. And then you go do your day. You do your dishes, clean your clothes, go to work, make food. That's Shintoism. Make sure you respect the community, keep things clean, take your shoes off in the house. That's Shinto. That's pretty much it. That's Shinto. That's the way of the gods. Because God, cleanliness is next to godliness, right? You want to keep things clean. When you take a bath, you don't take a bath. You take a shower first, and then you take a bath. Because you don't want to sit in filth. Clean yourself off, and then you enter the purified water of the bath. Keep your house clean. Keep your community clean. That's a big thing in Buddhism. In fact, you'll notice if you go to, I noticed it more in Himeji when I went, but when you go to Himeji and you walk through some of the storefronts, I mean, I'm sure it's everywhere in Japan. I've seen it in Tokyo too, but you walk through the storefronts, before the stores open, there are people out there, old and young, that work, they own the businesses, and they're out there on their hands and knees scrubbing the sidewalks with brushes or kind of like rough sponges. Some have pressure wash. They do it every single day because you want to keep the entrance to your business clean. That'll attract good paying, respectable customers as opposed to disrespectful, non-paying customers. It'll keep your business clean and in line with God. I think that's pretty cool. Alrighty, so we started out with Mount Meru, Mount Sinai, and we started out looking at Hakone, Japan. I'll put this back on the screen here. And looking at the Hakone shrine where I just visited. and looking at the mountains and all of these places and how all of this stuff is really coming from the same place in the human experience. We're all seeing pretty much the same exact thing. And that means that we should probably stop hating each other and making fun of each other's religions. I mean, religious jokes are funny, okay? You know, Christians raping kids and Jews loving money and Muslims being suicide bombers. I guess you could get a laugh out of that if you're into that. But like ultimately, we all see the world in the same way, and maybe we should kind of recognize that because it would help to stop a lot of the conflict that we have in the world. Top of Hakone Mountain, just like Meru, just like Sinai, it's like Fuji. It's the altar of God. God comes down on the white horse. This is who we are. This is what humans are. We use the same symbols. We use the same stories. We all follow in the footsteps of Jesus, which means that Shintoism, folks, Shintoism is Israel. Every practitioner of Shinto, which means just living your life, is an Israelite. I'm an Israelite. I read the book of Romans, I'm a Jew. Because Jews are not a people. Israel is not a place. The Holy Land is not a place. The Promised Land is not a place. The jihad is not a war. It's all a metaphor. The Holy Land is inside of you. It's the heart. It's the jewel of Lao Tzu. It's Jesus in the heart. That's the Holy Land. That's the Promised Land. The place of peace, tranquility, Buddhism, Daoism. When we strive to connect with God, we climb to the top of these mountains to talk with God. We go into the womb to talk with God. We strive to communicate with God. That makes us Israelites. We're all God's chosen people. All of us. Muslim, Christian, Jew, Buddhist, Taoist, Hindu, Jainism, and the various religions of, quote, native peoples. I saw someone earlier, I should have mentioned this, someone mentioned the so-called native tribes of the Americas and how their beliefs are very similar to what you find in the Far East. They are. There used to be a land bridge that connected the two, so they probably wandered back and forth. Another listener in the chat, Altrusian Grace Media. Glad to hear you got into Joseph Campbell. May I suggest also the male archetypical work of Robert Moore? I know Robert Moore, yes. King, warrior, magic, a magician, lover. Ties in nicely with the myth research of Campbell. I do know Robert Moore. I've never read. Well, I don't think I've read Robert Moore. Thank you, Patriot Girl, for recognizing that this is all about hopefully finding some kind of peace. Hopefully. Gnarly Sheen, Huey, Burrito, Nate. I got like 4 minutes here. What is Nate saying? Actually, everything is fine. He said, I Shintoed it up earlier when I honored fried green beans with onion and garlic. Well, I guess in a sense, when you eat, itadakimasu, people say, the people of Japan, they don't have a religion. What do you call this? Itadakimasu. You're praying. You know what itadakimasu means? It means I'm thankful for the food that I'm about to receive. And when you're done eating, you say gochu sama deshita. Or gochu sama deshita means thank you for the food that I did just receive. The bell in the Shinto shrine is the church bell. The water is the baptism. The shrine is the temple. It's the body. It's a physical expression of the temple. That's what the shrine is. The temple being the body. It's a location. It embodies the spirit of that location, which you can destroy the body, but you can't destroy the gateway to the soul, or the gateway where the soul transcends this world, which is why that bomb did not destroy that gateway in Hiroshima. Talk about divine protection. All right, Nate says, he says, Christianity spread to secular factors, zeal, moral appeal, organization. Oh, I completely agree with. I agree with you. Christianity spread to largely secular factors. Gibbon actually writes about that in the book in part. He says, well, I don't know if he references moral appeal, but he references the organization of it. In fact, Christianity kind of ironically spread largely due to engineering. It spread because of the roads that the Romans built. That's why it spread so fast. And it spread because zeal or zealotry, and it spread because of moral appeal might be kind of a difficult word to or term to interpret, considering that the early church was filled with really bad people, like criminals who were attracted to the absolution of their sins for a second chance. Not that you can't get a second chance, shouldn't have a second chance, but there was a lot of really bad people at first. And where the Jews said, hey, you can't come into our religion, you can't get saved, we're the only ones that get saved, we're special. The Christians were like, no, everybody can. And stop doing that stuff with blood, do it with water. And then the Christians were like, well, actually, now if you don't convert, we're going to just kill you. Which is kind of like what the Jews did. It's kind of like what they blame on the Muslims. You don't convert, we'll kill you. Sure, the Muslims did that. So did the Christians. Everybody did that. The Jews did it too, to some extent, just a little bit differently. They said, since you're not one of us, they don't even give you the chance to convert. You're not one of us. You work for us. You're slaves. You're the goyim. You're our cattle. So everybody kind of does the same horrible shit is the point. And we're all pretty much the same. And we should recognize that rather than fighting with each other. Lame Matrix says, the truth is within you and this place and everyone is a lie. Let me read that again. The truth is within you and this place and everyone is a lie. Well, this place is, I don't know if I'd say lie. It's kind of like that negative positive of the Buddhist teachings. It's like, it's not really happiness and sadness that you have to get rid of. It's that you shouldn't hold on to them. Like, life is real, but it's not something you should hold on to. That's the idea of the feather in the heart in the underworld judgment of the Hall of Judgment in Egypt. Same kind of a thing. Okay, we're essentially out of time. Let's see if there's anybody in the chat. Anybody in the chat, you got comments, you got questions, please send them in now. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight. Blake is also here. Howdy from Tucson. Howdy, Blake. How is the homelessness in Tucson? I heard that if you elected Regina Romero again, she would clean it up. That's what I heard. All right, what else do we have? Jim says he uses mouthwash. Well, mouthwash, I guess, will work. I don't like the food colorings in it. It's not really about, I mean, it is about literal cleanliness, but it's about symbolic cleanliness. You're rinsing your mouth out with water. You know, it's like soap doesn't clean your mouth out from saying words like fuck, but your parents put it in your mouth because it's supposed to clean your mouth. It's the same thing. I make my own mouthwash, by the way. Patriot Girl, organized religion divides. Well, yep, exactly, it does. It doesn't mean that the core root source of those religions is wrong, though. Everything is fine. So loving and so sweet, these Abrahamic cults. I actually almost had like a Freudian slip kind of a thing there. I read that as barbaric cults. Flux says Rome burning might have been a false flag. See, that's the story that's always told. I just think that if you're Nero and considering the context, what was happening at the time and the threats from the Christians, I find it really, really, really ironic that the places the Christians hated all burned. Like, they burned the temples, they burned the statues, they burned the libraries, the pagan books. Like, I don't know if that was a false flag so much as it was a vengeful assault on Rome. I trust Manly Hall too. Manly Hall, he believed, that's where I actually heard the idea for the first time. He said it's likely the Christians burned Rome. That's why it burned. And then the politics of the situation with Nero was contributed to the confusion of it all. Let's see if there's anything else. We're out of time now, but let's see if there's anything else really quick I could throw up here on the screen. Marilyn Kluger just got here from Florida. Well, just got here from listening from Florida. I miss Florida. Hope you're doing good in Florida, Maryland. Thank you for tuning in. Hey, Gary is here. Howdy, Gary. Gary's got to be one of our 5-star listeners. Gary is a lifetime subscriber to the Secret Teachings. Thank you, Gary. Arigato gozaimasu. Thank you, Gary. And we will close this window out and bring up the show promo again, Gate of the Gods. All right, Gnarly Sheen, Noka, everything is fine. Nate, no, Nero was not a good guy, Nate. I don't think he was a good guy. Huey, and everybody else in the chat, thank you for tuning in tonight. I'm going to wind the show down right now. We're going to pick maybe I'll pick a show from the mixing board. Maybe it'll play better on YouTube. If you're listening audio wise, it's going to sound really good, crystal clear. But hey, if you haven't subscribed to the show, please do that. Listen to the show Monday through Friday. You can find us, tstradio.info, artygable@yahoo.com. This YouTube show is only because listeners like you listen to the show, download the show, stream the show, and do that despite the fact that on Fridays it's free with no advertisements. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight. We also have Catherine W. here from South Korea, who says they are infatuated by torii gates. Make sure you put an I on the end of that. Otherwise, it's bird gates. Although I think that there's a relationship between because the birds would sit on the gateways. In fact, look at the depictions of Lilith or the Queen of the Night. She had the owls that stood on the sides of her in the entrance to the underworld. So that's what the guardian dogs are at the shrines. Or the beast, the monster hunter, Gilgamesh, Osiris. They hold the two beasts, the lions. They're guardians to the other realm. All right. Thank you, Patriot Girl. Excellent show. I learned so much. Thank you. Huey hears us on Spreaker. Thank you for listening on Spreaker, Huey. I really appreciate that. I really, truly do. Great show. Everything is fine. And Catherine, yes, we've both walked through many of these gates. Gnarly Sheen says, spirited away. Absolutely. Kamikakushi, spirited away to the other side, the other realm. All right, tstradio.info, artygable@yahoo.com, links below. Everything is there that you need to know about the show. Please subscribe. Please grab a book. Please leave us a review on Apple. And as always, stay safe, stay informed, stay healthy. And I will talk to you on the next broadcast. And I just, by the way, learned that you can put up all the... I'm so technologically antiquated. You can put up all the comments on the screen at one time. I didn't know that. Did not know that. Oh, there they are. Have a great night.